February 17th meeting of our Design Review Committee. I'd like to call the meeting to order. The DRC is a subcommittee of Historic Zoning Commission. The meeting is informal and designed to guide applicants through the process of obtaining a certificate of appropriateness or COA for projects within the city's historic districts in light of the Historic District Design Guidelines. Applicant participation in DRC meetings is voluntary but highly recommended. Changes made or suggestions taken by the applicant based on discussions with the DRC are the applicant's choice, but the DRC makes no representation as to whether any changes or suggestions made during the meeting will be approved by the voting body, which is the Historic Zoning Commission. There are 5 items on the afternoon's agenda. When the item is called, please introduce yourself and generally describe your item in about 3 to 5 minutes. So we're ready for item 1, discussion of new construction at 600 Boyd Mill Avenue, Historic Magnolia Hall subdivision, lots 2 through 5. Push the button when you're ready. And introduce yourself, of
Sure.
course.
My name is Mike Hathaway, 906 Studio Architects. Thank you for allowing us to be here. You know Bernie Butler, the developer of this property. He is joining us as well, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts about what we propose. As you know, we've talked several times about Magnolia Hall and the beauty of that site and the beauty of the original Italianate house that's on site. And we, after multiple discussions with this team as well as the planning commissioners, we came up with the site plan, I think, that was sent to you. Yeah, that's up on the
Yes.
screen. And we want to present the first 4 homes to you tonight and plan to present 3 and 3 at the next 2 DRCs for your review and comment. Our intentions were never to copy the original house by any means. Our intention is for that to be the crown jewel of this site. And those who remember some of the iterations, we had much more density on this site at one time and peeled it back to just 10 lots and have planned a large open space. As you can see on the very orangey yellow screen view. Does it look that way on the? No, it's just that one.
I don't know where I think it's the way the light shines.
Okay.
It looks much better on these.
Yeah, good. Yeah. So you can see we have a large open park area planned to really highlight the home. We do have a buyer for the home that we're working with as well for renovation. So we're excited about that as part of this whole process. But I would love to present to you our first 4 homes that we're proposing. And let me describe a little bit about the style that we chose. Instead of going pure 1830 style, we picked a style somewhere in the late 1800s, early 1900s for these architectural styles of the homes. Lot 2. Lot 2 we were calling a Queen Anne cottage, and that relates to some of the details that has been proposed. Lot 3 is more of a Tudor bungalow. You can see that in the detailed trim as well. Lot 4, more of a Tudor English revival style. And then Lot 5 is a Queen Anne cottage as well. All are 1.5 stories in scale, again, in deference to Magnolia Hall, the original home. And material-wise, mostly brick and siding. We tried to do a copper roof on that lot, as you see there, on the turret, to give it some variety and interest. On Lot 2, because it faces Boyd Mill, we've taken special care to look at the side elevation that faces Boyd Mill, because that'll be fully exposed. But each of these, again, the scale, these are 75-foot lots on the ones we're doing now. So fairly minimal frontage. I can't argue that it's a lot of square footage, but that's mostly unseen as you walk down that street. It's going to look like a cottage size, but behind it's a little bit larger home. And I would love to answer any questions you guys have. Bernie, I don't know if you want to add anything to that?
I'm Bernie Butler, D9 Development. Hey, Scott. We've all been working on this for so very long. And we have worked so very hard to try to create some beautiful elevations that are historically relevant and are going to look great for a really long time, while at the same time creating floor plans that are contemporary, really relevant to the way people live today. And so, the elevations, we couldn't be happier about where we are, and we think that people are going to want to live in them. So, so we look forward to your comments. Thank you.
Amanda?
Thank you, everyone. I agree. The elevations are exceedingly, designed well, and there were a couple questions that staff wanted to broach. When this was reviewed by the Historic Zoning Commission at the development plan phase for a recommendation to Planning Commission and to Board of Mayor and Aldermen, there were a few comments that staff provided in order to help inform those boards, but also inform the applicant as the project moved forward. There is a little bit of a context difficulty in reviewing this project. This is a large site with a historic home that predates a lot of the homes in that historic district. So the styles that you see on the screen are more contemporary to the style of Magnolia Hall and less to the style of the overall district. So that is a decision I would encourage the DRC to consider the appropriateness of that. I do think it would be appropriate to veer toward more of the Magnolia Hall aesthetic in that location because of that pocket, and less toward the overall street because the scale is appropriate and the designs are done very well. There was one other comment that was shared by staff at the time, and that was about form. So you can see on the screen, this is the streetscape that would be created. Boyd Mill would be to your far left, with Magnolia Hall being closer to the far right. The forms look appropriate from the street view. There is some concern, however, about the form that is created as viewed from the Boyd Mill Avenue side. The site plan wasn't initially submitted. I'd asked the applicant to provide that, which they were glad to do. You can see on the site plan, the elevation from Boyd Mill shows a very long form, and you can see that for the first 4 lots here that we're discussing today. This form is not typical of the form that you see elsewhere on the street or even typical to what's across the street, which is outside of the historic district. It is a form that has wider mass as facing Boyd Mill than most buildings along Boyd Mill Avenue. So the comment was made at the development plan stage that it would be appropriate to either detach the garages or somehow reorient them so that the form was more indicative of the district, which typically has detached garages rather than attached. So it would be appropriate, at least for the couple, the first few lots on this street, maybe differing on the lots that we're not discussing today, to have detached garages as opposed to attached. Now, I will go to, bear with me a second. Lot 2, you see a beautiful elevation here, beautiful scale. You've done a great job. Here, I'm sorry about that. I'm not sure why that's doing that. Look over here. So here is what you would see from Boyd Mill Avenue for Lot 2. That is a concern because it is a form that is not indicative of the context of that street. So that'll be staff's closing comments at this time. Thanks.
Okay. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
All right, thanks, Sid.
I'd like you tonight to talk about where the precedents for these houses, where you feel like that and they're all, that's beautifully done. I just want to hear your thinking process behind each of these.
Sure. I don't know that I have a individual story for each, but globally, our intention was to be respectful of the era of the main house, but not be in that same era. It would be sort of like where I live on Fair Street. There were original farmhouses, and then the next generation was a infill homes. And then there was another generation of infill homes where they took a house out and divided it, like my lot is two small lots. So our intention was to think, what is an appropriate, where it's not so drastically different in type of style of architecture, that if you went to a 1930s Craftsman or that, we felt like that was too dramatically different. And so it was that, instead of 1830s, it was an 1890 to 1920 kind of era, was the idea of what came out of the architecture here that we're
Okay.
proposing.
So I think that's what I was trying to get at, so, because I see some stick style here, you know, with the Queen Anne, mixed with the Queen Anne, and then Tudor, and again, you have these, you know, two of them have like a maturity porch, and I could see, you know, from Main Street, you could pull that. So I'm just trying to get a sense of where, how you know,
Sure,
think about that.
sure.
All right, thank you.
Josh?
Yeah, boy, they're beautiful, is what I'll say. The thing that really jumped off the page to me is, and that I'm concerned about, is that Boyd Mill side. It just looks really long, and I know I'm broken it up some, but I just am a little concerned about how that fits with the rest of the Boyd Mill
Well,
piece.
let me speak to a little bit of that. We're doing the very best we can to make this work, to make Magnolia Hall not be Beechwood. And so, in order to do the lots that we got approved for, if, you know, for us to stick a smaller house with a detached garage on the side, I don't know what that's gonna look like. I want to also know, if you'll notice from the site plan, and I know that every time we get in these conversations and you go, well, we can't take into consideration the landscaping. Well, our intent is not to show the side of that building, and it's going to be from the start that way. So as you're driving down Boyd Mill, you're not going to see the side of that building. So we really want the presentation to these homes to be the front of the streets. And not that we want the sides ugly by any stretch, but I get your feedback, but I don't know how we can do it different. Yeah.
I'm not saying what the right answer is
Yeah,
there.
I
I'm
get
just
it.
that was my initial reaction looking at it, and
Yeah. Thank you.
yeah, of course.
Brian?
Mike, could you remind me again your date ranges, kind of your concept where you're looking to, for the styles of the homes?
Roughly 1880s to 1910s, 1920s.
One thing that would be helpful for me, like when you do, if you come back to DRC or the voting meeting, is to have something that kind of shows the concept in relation to the actual architectural style of the house. Just kind of, you kind of see what it would kind of look like as a whole. So I kind of see this site as a, you know, as a unified, it's definitely unique because you've taken these, 12 acres? And then, you know, you have the historic home, which is great. We have the view from Boyd Mill, and then what's on the side relates to that. And I'd kind of like to see that if you could do that.
Just to clarify, if you would, Brian, you're talking about, with our concept elevations, show an actual, if it's a Queen Anne in our mind, show an actual Queen Anne cottage next to it?
Well, what I'm thinking, if you were standing at Boyd Mill, and
Yes.
you're looking at Magnolia Hall, and you look to the left, you're going to see the new development. And I'd kind of like to see what that,
I got you.
how that, you know, what that view shed is like.
I got you.
So that's kind of what I'm.
You want more of a rendering that would show what ultimately it's going to look like when it's completed,
And the
and how it all
relationship.
ties together.
The relationship between the two.
Mr. Lester, can you turn your mic on if you haven't? Thank you.
Okay, good.
I'm not sure anyone else did, so you may want to repeat that.
Well, it had to do with the concept drawing of being like at Boyd Mill, and looking back toward the development and seeing Magnolia Hall in the same picture for the relationship between all those structures.
So what I'm hearing for the good of the order is the architectural style of Magnolia Hall, which is the 1830s aesthetic, as related to the styles, the period of styles chosen by the applicant for the development on the site. Okay.
That's right, because I think it should be, maybe it shouldn't be a copy, and we're not really asking for a copy, but they should definitely complement each other in that view shed.
We very specifically didn't do that. And it was because we were trying to make it obvious that these were new homes. We weren't trying to create something that, that was the Garden District of New Orleans that were all 1840s Italianate. So you don't see some, Italianate things in here. Just in the same way that the funeral home property on Main Street created houses that it was obvious those really were relevant houses to Main Street, but they didn't, nobody thinks that they were built 150 years ago. And so we have this majestic 1840s house, and so we really wanted to do things that were historically relevant, that represented Franklin, that married with the architecture of Magnolia Hall, but nobody believed that they were built at the same time as Magnolia Hall. So that's what we were trying to pull off, and I couldn't be more pleased, by the way, Mr. Hathaway.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that explanation of your concept. Where the funeral home property is, it's on Main Street. And you see that in the context of Main Street, and then you take the drive back, and now you're in the new development. But when you're on Boyd Mill, you're going to see this entire view shed. It's a little different.
Well, I don't think you're going to see the entire view shed, because I don't, you're not going to see, you're going to look down that driveway and see that the inside of that street under those maple trees. Not as many maple trees as we wanted, by the way, but that's what you're going to see. But because of the lawn is going to be screened and everything else, so basically when you look down that driveway, what you're going to see is the front of Magnolia Hall, because those trees and everything all around those houses are going to kind of screen those houses, so that everything that when you come down the street is going to be about the house, about the main house. And these houses are just complementary, cool things beside it, if I can say it that way.
And if you can kind of show me that.
Yeah.
As though I stood at Boyd Mill looking back.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm asking.
Love to do that. Thank you. Great questions, by the way.
And if I may, I apologize. I had another comment I wanted to share that I think is relevant before we move forward, and I apologize for the delay in that. It is appropriate to note that as we talk about form, one of the guidelines that apply for the development is that each lot can have a lot coverage up to 35%. That means the hardscape underneath the roof may measure up to 35% of the building lot. And that corresponds with the city's landscape surface area requirements for individual residential lots as well. So it is unclear from the information provided if that's the case. I'd love for the applicant to weigh in on that if they have that information, but that might be another reason that the form should be adjusted as well.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have those exact numbers with me, but we will definitely look at that as we progress forward. Thank you.
Mary?
I don't know if, okay. Thank you all. The lot coverage, of course, would matter. And also, I really feel like this is worth some of the things that you all have done where you can really envision what it looks like. And I don't think we have that tonight. And then I was told you won't see this length of house from Boyd Mill. Is there going to be a brick wall or?
They're going to be 2 rows, diagonal rows of big magnolias. that run down that wood fence, the 4L fence, along the side of that house and along the front of the lawn of Magnolia Hall to screen the lawn and the houses from view on Boyd Mill.
Yeah, I think we want to see that. And I do wonder if on that corner, if a brick wall might not be an option.
What corner?
The Boyd Mill,
By the side of Lot 2, right?
yeah,
That parallels Boyd Mill?
Boyd Mill. But I'm glad the site plan's like it is. You know, I always want the historic home to be the star, so I would say that at least getting up to, I don't think it's real relevant when you get past Magnolia Hall, but getting up to it, in my mind, if the houses, I know you want them to be, we want them to be elegant, we want them to all that, but to me, they're a bit over-articulated and competing with Magnolia. So,
Lisa?
thank you.
Can we go there, Amanda, on Street View to Boyd Mill in that same vicinity to help us?
Yes, just
Picture.
give me a moment, please.
And while you're pulling that up, yeah, I would echo what Mr. Laster was saying, that the visibility of lot number 2 is going to be something that we need to understand, and the lot coverage on that particular piece, potentially, if it were smaller, it might not create as much of a visible inconsistency from Boyd Mill. Okay, so here we are at the entrance.
So this is the entrance currently to Magnolia Hall from Boyd Mill Avenue. Glass lanes parallel to the drive on this side, and then the Jim Warren Park is back here. Lot 2 is proposed to be in this location.
And what is across from Lot 2?
This is Laurel Wood
Laurelwood Apartments.
condo, I believe they're townhomes.
My final comment would be that even though I'm certain that you're going to be adding the landscaping that you described, that's not something that we can take into consideration or even really rely upon, because it's landscaping and it comes and goes.
In my developments, it really doesn't, because the HOAs, the way the HOAs are funded, they're funded. So it's like us working with the city on the 2-acre lake. So, you know, we're having to establish funds way ahead in perpetuity to make sure that the city doesn't have to 35 years from now come back and deal with the lake, right? So in the same way, the landscaping is being managed, and the plants that are being put in are of a caliber that once we put this stuff in there, it's not like 5-gallon things that we bought at the Home Depot. You know, it's big stuff that's going to look good from the start.
Yeah.
And so it isn't just like some things that happen.
No, I understand. But given that, I still think that it's important for us to look at this from the Boyd Mill perspective minus the landscape because we are, in our guidelines, that's something that we're not supposed to consider.
But in reality, you're not going to see it.
Okay, and then my final comment would be that if the lot coverage were smaller on that piece number 2, that would help ameliorate what I see as a potential problem from the street view. Thank you.
Kathy?
All right, I get to wrap it all up.
Oh, no.
All right, let's talk about Board Mill, the big question. I get the balance of the greenery on both sides. I think what helps us to decide how, yes, I do. I guess what helps us to maybe decide a little bit more how that feels when you go down Boyd Mill, and pulling up the Google map was really helpful because it's a pretty naked looking site right now. And your landscaping, it creates a sort of buffer zone and brings you in. Even the setback on those first 4 lots are significantly different than the setback on the smaller ones that we have yet to talk about, 2 through 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we have that green space too, all giving sort of a funnel effect to offset Magnolia Hall. And I like the idea of this streetscape, but from the perspective coming from Magnolia Hall. So we see not only these first 4, but the rest of the remaining ones too, to give us a feel for how that plays on the presence of that side of the site in balance to Magnolia Hall. If that's something that you could generate, that type of perspective with, or a streetscape coming down, just like Commissioner Lassiter has talked about, coming down from that Boyd Hall entrance. So another perspective rendering, doesn't have to be super fancy, but just to give us the look of these styles. We've got the detailed drawings on the first 4, and it's hard for me to vote great without seeing the rest of them.
Well, we'd love to show you all of them at the same time. We were going to submit all 10 at one time so that you had the whole streetscape, because we've got them all designed.
Okay?
So, but we were encouraged to break them up into pieces.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that, because then we can dive in on some of the other elements of it. But then again, as the whole, sometimes it's hard not to, I don't want to make too many comments on the individuals without looking at the whole too, and kind of going back and forth on that one.
Well, we got things for you to look at.
Okay.
Is all my point.
Okay, good. But I think as a whole, the length of these do not bother me as much, as long as they meet the requirement of the 35% coverage. I think once you come into the site, that's not going to bother you that much. And even as you go down Boyd Mill, I think because of the type of screening you've provided already with landscape, and if you could show us what would a wall look like in addition to the landscaping. So somehow we have a balance of that. Maybe that would ease the appearance, or just give us an option on how we can lessen that length of that very first lot too. What else did I have? The elevations that you've shown are really quite handsome. The detailing's handsome. It's a story and a half, and some of the appearances look a little bit more magnificent than a story and a half, but that's okay right now. It's a good look. Detailing's everything on it if we try and set it apart from the main home, Magnolia Hall, or if we do a nod to it. So I'm not ready now to make a comment on the exact detailing, but they look excellent from what you've shown us tonight. So I think we're off to a really good start. Thank you.
Okay. I think the 35% is a real issue with me. Because I'm just looking at it from the site plan. I would question 2, 3, and maybe 4 as to whether those are 35%. But that's just looking at the site plan. So that's a real thing. I think on lot 2, as everyone else has said, that length along Boyd Mill is what jumps out at you. And if I'm right, it's somewhere around 125 plus feet long. Maybe a little, I was just adding up some interior dimensions, but that looked like that was about it. As far as the landscaping versus, I think somebody suggested a wall versus the actual landscaping as to whether or not what would be best. I think if we saw what the actual landscaping was going to look like, some kind of perspective, that might work. I don't know that with that split rail fence that goes all along Boyd Mill, I don't know that the brick wall is going to be the right thing. But it'd be nice to look at a perspective and see the either or. And yes, I know we're not supposed to consider landscaping, but that might be what we need to do here. I don't know at this stage. The rest of it is fine. I think I think what you've done to try to highlight Magnolia Hall, Brian made a good suggestion that we just get some kind of perspective looking from the new lot designs of those houses looking up toward Magnolia Hall and see how that fit, if we can do that in some way. But I think looking head on at it, I think Magnolia Hall is still going to be the preeminent structure on that property. So those are my only comments. I think this is a good, we're beginning to make it move a little bit, so that's good.
We need to.
I got you. But good news that you got a buyer for the Magnolia Hall.
Mr. Chair, just to clarify what I was meaning about a brick wall, if there were a brick wall that came on the property side of that house, you still had the landscaping. I'm suggesting that a partial brick wall would break up that length.
Okay, so
So
about
I just
from
want
where
to
to where?
clarify what I was saying.
Okay, but about from where to where?
Well, right now,
Just
I mean, how do I say on this drawing? Maybe.
On the corners.
Okay. I would say, do you see where that blue
Yeah,
area
yeah.
is? If you came straight over, about there.
Okay, just came
From what I can
straight.
see from
Yeah,
this.
no, I know.
I don't
So
think,
about from here down is what you're saying, right?
yes, sir, inside. I'm thinking of houses that have brick walls
About from the,
as part of the home.
is that a courtyard or a pool or whatever that is?
Okay, so from this
Okay, from the
area-
courtyard
On the
back to the
other
corner.
side,
Okay.
Mike. Yeah. Yes.
About
Yes.
halfway down the floor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
about halfway.
I just wanted to clarify that
Thank you.
because it
Thank
didn't
you.
sound
No,
like
I got you.
I was being very clear.
Okay, anything else? Susan?
I wonder if, Amanda, if you would respond to Mary's concern about the detail, maybe need to be simplified. Do you have an opinion on that?
So the guidelines would recommend that new buildings be of a character that is compatible with the district. So we have a situation here where we have a large lot mansion home that has been approved for development through a process we've all been involved with. This is the integration approach where the intent by the applicant and approved by all the bodies was that the architecture will be sympathetic to the district and the house and integrate into the development as if it were an extension of it and it evolved over time. So the applicant's take on that is to avoid copying the architecture of the house outright, 1830s, 40s, and try to land at a vernacular that is closer to that end than maybe perhaps the overall district, which is going to be more of a 20s, 30s, 40s vintage. And so the architecture is higher style than you see in most of the district, but it is closer to the vintage of the house. And so it would be a decision of the commission as to whether or not the applicant should lean into the architecture of Magnolia Hall or lean into the architecture of the overall district. And I believe they've chosen the house, which I understand that rationale. It is a style that one by one, as we look through each of the houses, and that's part of the reason that staff recommended bringing in a batch at a time, is to understand the detailing in relation to the home. So there are some really good comments here about understanding exactly that. What does the house look like in relation to the styles that you brought forward? Are they competing? Are they not? I think one of the things that would be helpful is understanding the architecture of that house, looking at it in relation side by side to some of these homes with scale, and massing and height in mind, so that you can see. I believe the applicant's intent is that the massing of the house will, when I say the house, the Magnolia Hall house would obviously be more of a stature than as you would see any of these buildings from the new street. But Lot 2 is a little bit more problematic because of its exposure on the corner. As far as Ms. Besser's point, I think that it may be to be seen with the renderings that the rest of the DRC has asked for, to see if there's a concern about the amount of detailing in relation to the style of the home. I have been working with the applicant on some proposals for Magnolia Hall, and I'm happy to say that are they the prospective owners or the new owners now? They're very excited and want to change very little on the outside of the home, which is exciting. So I too would like to see some renderings as well.
Okay, anybody got anything else? Thank you all. Hopefully this has helped you. Homework. That's right. All right, we're ready for the next one. Discussion new construction accessory carousel building at 230 Franklin Road, the factory. What would a meeting be without you guys? And it's great. It's great. Okay. Go ahead. Jenny, you want to take it?
Okay, so this is, like Amanda said, this is the carousel building, and you all have seen this before, but as we've gotten into more details with the carousel and working with Ken Means on sort of the pieces that he has to put it together, we needed to make a few tweaks to the design. So it's largely similar, it's the same size. There are a few things that have changed, and I'm going to see what we have sent you guys, if you want to maybe go to some of the elevations, Amanda, and there's probably some 3D views that I think are a little easier to understand to start. So that might be page 3, starting at page 3. So if you can tell from this, it's similar pitched roof like we had before. What's different is the building before was essentially a square rectangle type building, and now to fit the round carousel building in and still have the appropriate amount of circulation around it based on the size of what we have, the building base, the walls, it's more like an octagon shape. So pretty typical of what you would see for a lot of carousel buildings. But this is not what we had shown before, so we wanted to come back and show it to you. So we kept the pitch roof similar to what we had before. Previous to that, we also had a banding around the base that sort of reflected what's happening in a lot of the buildings around the campus that are adjacent to this. We are showing similar doors to what we had before. A lot of these bifold doors, or these garage-looking doors, they actually fold up in half, so they'll provide a little canopy when you're under it. They're not roll-up doors like you would typically see for a garage door. So we think that's a nice feature to add to get a little bit of cover, and you'll see those around the building. The other openings are, storefront doors, similar to ones we've had approved around the campus. And Amanda, you may want to go through each of these. There's a couple of different options as we're working through it. One of those says skylight alternate. Let's see where you land.
Just to make sure everyone's clear on where we are before I move forward, this is the location. So it's back behind Building 12, between Building 12 and Building 8. So this is not viewed from Franklin Road or from Liberty Pike. I'll scroll down.
That area is currently a loading dock area, so we are making it more of a pedestrian gathering plaza. That's good. And so I'm going to take you through a couple different options. These are all very similar. It's what we've had to happen on a few of the other things. There have been an availability issue or something of that nature, so we're showing a couple of options just to get your feedback. should we run into something like that coming up. So this one shows the overhead doors, like I mentioned, at the ends of the building, basically on sort of the 4 of the edges, or 3 of the edges. One side is a retaining pond. Has those doors that will open up. So they're kind of free-flowing. When the weather is good, we want to keep those open because it's all flowing out into a really great plaza out there. So we picture families, people being able to gather and seeing the carousel. We think it's very important to be able to see the carousel. If you go to the next one, Amanda. Yep, that's the same. That's a similar one to what we had before. So this one is just showing what's great about this carousel, and that we learned that we didn't know before is typically when you're in a carousel, there's a top on it. You can't see through it. Only happens for an outdoor carousel. Everything indoor is really open. It's got a band around it, but you can see up. And so we thought it might be nice to potentially add a skylight. So we're kind of working with Ken to see if that's a possibility to get that on here. So those on the carousel can really see up to the sky. So that's one option. And then the last one is on the far right there. Oh, you can probably leave that one that you had. I know, it's kind of a confusing set, this one that we put together. Instead of the 2 doors that we show on the bottom left, we've got one large one of those garage doors. So essentially just a wider opening. I think that's probably our preference, but I know there's some availability that
The
may
large
come with
door.
that. Mhm.
I
That's why we're
can see
showing the
that,
smaller
yeah.
one too.
It folds,
It folds basically up in half
Yeah.
like this.
just like the
So,
small ones.
and so those are the main differences. The materiality is the same. It's brick with a concrete type band on the bottom, metal roof. What's happening at the corners now, since the base of the building is an octagon, is each sort of area, if you can probably see in that upper left and upper right image there, it creates almost like a little covered porch area. So those walking into the building have a little bit of cover, which we think is nice on inclement weather days. There's space inside for people to queue, but we imagine there might be a need outside as well. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that.
Amanda? Emily?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an updated plan, as Gina mentioned, from last May's DRC meeting for the proposed carousel building here at the factory. It is an accessory structure which has an octagonal shape, which is not seen from street view, and it generally meets the intent of the guidelines. The proposed skylights also that are proposed would also not be visible from the street and are utilized on the main factory building. Thank you.
And I'd like to add a couple of things to that. One thing I'd ask Emily to let me discuss a little further. There's a site plan shown with this, but because of the roof overhang design, it's hard to understand the footprint. So it's hard to show 2-dimensionally, even 3-dimensionally, an octagonal shape. So what we would recommend, just to make sure that everyone's clear in the understanding, is that there's some sort of building footprint that's shown to show where those walls are, and maybe just have the roof form dotted around it, so we can understand that shape, because it is really hard to read from a 2D perspective. They've done a great job rendering it. It's just a difficult form to relay in that perspective. Staff is curious to see what the elevations would look like with the doors down. So if we could see what those doors look like. And one comment that was brought forward with the original development plan proposal that preceded Emily's time here is that the base be lowered to be more typical of a base that you would see on a building. So if there is a request to have the banding, I believe this is stucco or cast stone on the bottom.
It was more masonry or concrete. It's good, if you look at the building right next to it, Building 8, that it's the closest to, that's a very similar
That's a
base
similar
of that
height to
building.
it?
Similar height and base. We
Okay.
actually have a sheet that I'm noticing, I don't think is in here, that basically shows you all the buildings around, the height of the band, and sort of where we fit into
Okay.
that. So I'll make
I was
sure that that's, I'll
about
make
to
sure
be
that's
what I
included.
ask, is
Yes.
if there is a relationship, because I know you guys don't do anything without some sort of, thought to
Yeah.
what's around it. If we could see that building in relation to it, I think that would be
I
really
think there
helpful.
was some feedback from DRC on that too, last year. That was a response, I believe, to a DRC comment.
Okay. Kathy, you go first this time.
Okay, my question too is the reason you prefer the larger garage door What is the reason for that?
We just want it to be as open as possible to that plaza, more
Okay,
than
it's
anything.
not like
Yeah.
servicing equipment or
No,
just more open?
more open. Both would work great. That's probably just a design for that reason.
Okay, so when I'm looking at that slide, the two top elevations, the one on the right shows the big door open right there, and the one on the left shows the two little ones open, right? Okay. When I look at those two elevations, I agree. I do prefer the larger opening. Thank you for clarifying. It's a rectangle roof with an octagon inside. So none of these bifold doors are on any of the angled walls?
That's correct.
Okay. When you show us that little octagon in there, show us what happens on each of
Okay. Yep.
those walls so we know whether it's window or wall or
Okay.
whatever. That's it. Thanks.
Okay, Lisa.
So can we go to the site plan? I just need some clarification on when you say that the door is open to a plaza, I want to understand where that is. And what you consider a plaza.
Are you able to sort of scroll over that area, Amanda? So really all the area, so where you see Building 6, plan north of that, and then where you see Building 8, sort of plan west of that, really everywhere there up until where you see Building 12 down below, that area all becomes like an outdoor pedestrian plaza now.
Okay.
Instead of, that's really essentially parking and loading right now.
So the garage doors that you're talking about would open to that? Is that what you're saying? Yeah, I would agree that I hope you can get the larger garage door. I think it's sleeker looking, and the smaller ones remind me of a barn. So, yeah, you get to enjoy the carousel some more. Thank you.
Okay, Mary?
Yeah, I'm very comfortable with it. I think it looks good.
Susan?
I would have to agree. I think I'm very comfortable with this. I'm looking at the storefront profiles and just, I appreciate that you've added this. And you feel like this is close to what's on the existing buildings, or how did you go about choosing this profile?
We tried to keep it similar with what we've been putting around the campus. So really that's where that came from.
I think it works really well with the factory. Thank you.
Josh?
Yep, I like it. I like the bigger openings as well.
Brian?
First of all, I say thank you for saving the original building where it was supposed to go in the first place, when we first talked about this years ago. So, and I think this is a great location. Can't be seen from Liberty or from Franklin Road. So, I think all of it's appropriate, whatever you choose on the wider doors or the skylights. I think it harmonizes well with the factory.
Great, thank you.
Ditto, I like the large doors. And Kathy?
What's your feeling about skylight or no skylight?
We're kind of working, you can answer that one if you want.
Well, yeah, getting daylighting in is important. I think we're trying to figure out it. There was a thought about having some transom windows at some point too. Yeah, there's a transom.
Oh, that's right.
alternate
Yes, we
too.
did have an
So
alternate there for a transom
It's
as well.
kind of, I think that's probably an either or kind of scenario. But it's, yeah, I think we were hoping for some flexibility, maybe to work with staff on some of those details if we could. But I think it's really kind of getting into the carousel building itself, the carousel itself, and how it kind of functions, and working with Ken Means and some of those details. I'm not a carousel expert, so.
You will be.
Yeah, will be, yeah.
Well, what I would recommend is when the submittal comes in, that the applicant has asked for an option for the smaller doors or bigger doors. because it is more of an availability
Correct.
question,
Ah.
as
Correct.
well as,
Material
an
availability.
option for the skylights versus the transoms, because I understand from your comment that you don't want both, it's just one or the other.
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. Material availability is very critical, right? And the plan is this is something we would like to deliver by year end and hopefully before it gets cold too, so it can be.
And if you did the
open, but-
transoms over the skylight, would transoms be on both ends of the rectangle?
Yeah, I believe we had them on both ends.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have an idea which one would give you more light?
I think it's similar.
Okay. Yeah. I'd just be kind of concerned too, skylights with leaking and the longevity of that, maintaining that surface.
I guess the one of the thoughts about the skylight is if you have the open carousel without the canopy, you're able to, be on the platform on one of the figures and look straight up. And so there's a little bit of that potential value. Transom window is close too. Transom window could play off the clear story windows we have in some other areas too. So
Yeah. I like the look of the transoms with the rest of the buildings on the site and that kind of a clear story effect. So I think it does fit better with the rest of the buildings on the site as opposed to when I look at the elevation where it has more of a shopping mall presence with the whatever stucco material that is, where you just have the carousel. So I think transom helps tie it better to the site.
And for what it's worth, staff would be supportive of using transoms with skylights. That's not a concern either. I don't think that's what the applicants intended to pursue, but if that's something that you want to pursue, it would certainly be supported by the guidelines.
Okay, anything else? Thank y'all.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're ready for the next item, discussion of demolition accessory at 724 Fair Street.
What document would you like to go over first?
Probably the contractor assessment. Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Jeff Friedfeld, I'm the homeowner of 724 Fair Street, here today to propose the demolition of the accessory structure of the barn in the back. This is a follow-up from the on-site that we had in December, where we were asked to provide more information from, as a follow-up to the engineer's note, but just more detail around that. The contractor went, did an assessment also, gave very detailed notes from a standpoint of what, from the engineer's assessment and what would have to be done, we were asked to come up with rough cost figures. So he gave like detailed for specific things, but then also what the total amount would be. But the big thing is that, and to before we get into it, is that he said essentially it would be building a brand new, like we would have to build an entirely new thing to be compliant with the codes and then to also be safe for people to go in, as well as for it being in the floodplain, that we would have to do a lot of work to get it, sound, because if the water came, it would rush and that building could go in the current state that it's in, was the overall assessment. So. Yep.
Okay, whoever.
Okay. The applicant's request to demolish the accessory structure falls under the Chapter 10 demolition and relocation. Per the guidelines, demolition may only be approved if the Historic Zoning Commission deems the structure unstable and meets the criteria for demolition. And that guideline states that if the structural instability or deterioration of a property is demonstrated through a report by a structural engineer or architect with demonstrated experience working with historic structures. Such a report must clearly detail the property's physical condition, reasons why rehabilitation is not feasible, and cost estimates for rehabilitation versus demolition and construction of a comparable structure. Based on the October DRC meeting, the DRC asked the applicant for more complete structural report. And based on the DRC site visit in December, the DRC then again emphasized the importance of supplying supplemental photos and cost estimates to restore the structure versus rebuilding a similar structure upon resubmittal of the request to demolish the structure, which the applicant has provided. Thank you.
So I will spend some time helping
Please.
to show the information. Here is the guideline that Emily just read. It is our understanding the applicant is seeking demolition based on structural instability, deterioration. So that is the information that's typically requested. Physical condition, reasons why rehabilitation is not feasible, cost estimates for rehab versus demolition and construction of a comparable structure. The applicant has relayed through a couple of meetings the intent for future action on site is to rebuild an accessory structure. This building is in the floodplain. Forgive me, I'm still getting used to Civic Clerk. Just a second. This is in the floodplain, and so the comments from the site visit relay that that would be something that would need to be taken into consideration because it is something that requires existing and new buildings to be approached in a different manner. So if I am to understand the information correctly that Emily and I both received and shared with you all, the page that you see here notes that rehabilitation would require new framing, and that new framing would need to be done in a manner that meets current code, which would be required, that there could be some reuse of the 2x4 rafters. New roof would need to be selected, and the approximate cost, sans roof, would be $15,750. Now, further, the applicants provided some information to show the commission related to new construction. And this has been a little bit difficult to follow, so bear with me. The carriage house is 4 feet below the floor elevation of the main house. If it were to be rebuilt, it could stay at that location as long as it is only storage. You cannot have a building constructed in the floodplain that's finished. If it's in the floodplain, it would have to be elevated 3 feet above base flood elevation for any habitable area. The information here indicates that approximate cost would be $18,000, and it appears from reading this that that is a rehabilitation estimate as well. So I have a little bit of confusion here, and perhaps Mr. Tosh can weigh in a little bit more. And then there is a note that estimated cost is approximately $60,000 to $70,000 once all items considered to repair are done. So it looks like the focus was on the framing, which I understand. That's the main concern is the stability of the structure. So we have an estimate sans roof of $15,750, and then an estimate at $18,000 without the slab. And I'm not quite sure what the difference is between those estimates and what the intent is to show the commission at this time. So you may want to weigh in on that.
The first group is for the rafters and for the top portion. Sorry. The first estimate is for the rafters and for the top portion of the structure, and replacing those rafters and the framing of the top portion. The second one, the 18,000, refers to the essentially the posts and the structure of that. And it was also pointing out that the pictures are pointing out that it's not sitting on a foundation, it's just sitting on dirt. You know, I think that even in the site visit, we all thought that in the back, it was sitting on the stone wall. It's actually not even sitting on the stone wall. It's in front of the stone wall. The stone wall, from looking at it, and obviously this is like, my son said that, like, as he believes that stone wall predates even the structure. So that was part of the sunken garden, and then the structure was built So it's not sitting even on that stone wall. So it's sitting on dirt. So that was the whole, and those were the pictures were for the pillar, the braces and everything showing that they're all termite, that they would all have to be replaced. So essentially the 4x4s of the whole structure, that's what the $18,000 is. And so to the slab, what's not including is the slab is that to get it up to code, like the contractor said, we would have to put the slab in. And so then when you add the first estimate plus the 18 plus the slab plus the roof, he said the total to rebuild it would be the 60, on the low side, the $60,000 to $70,000. And then
Okay.
it would essentially be a brand new structure.
Okay, so the two numbers, the 15,750 and the 18,000 would be $33,750 minus roof, minus concrete slab. And then obviously walls.
But all inclusive, it would be $60,000 to $70,000.
Correct. If we wanted to rebuild the structure,
Okay.
like the size that it is and the same, but he did say that it would not, like, we could use some of the materials, but it's going to be a brand new structure.
I got you. But-
Okay.
But it does not have to then, if it's just used for that purpose, it does not have to be raised to get it out of the floodplain. Is that right?
Right.
Okay, I think that's important, because that's not what you want to do. I know that.
Correct.
But that's what we need to understand in order to justify a demolition according to our guidelines.
Yep.
So we're looking at $60,000 to $70,000 versus, in effect, that's whether you as I understand it, it's whether you rebuild it or it's all new. I mean, it's virtually all new. You don't.
Wait, my turn.
All right, go first this time.
Okay. Do you mind to pull up the ordinance about demolition again for us? Just because we have to hit is there any way you can zoom? I'm so sorry. Okay, that's okay. That's okay. I'm gonna test my eyesight. I'm gonna have to go see my eye doctor after this. We really have to consider it, in my mind. You have to tick the boxes to get it to where we have an opportunity to even consider it. And for example, because I can't see that far and I was trying to pull it up on my screen and I'm having trouble.
Would you like me to read that?
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's been read.
Okay.
Because it's just my feedback. Like the comparison of the cost to rehab it versus the cost to build a new structure. What you've submitted doesn't do that, in my view, at all. I think the contractor assessment, and maybe I've missed it in here, but it needs to be something from a contractor with a real estimate signed, in my view. And we've got a ballpark, for rehab, but we don't have an estimate for the replacement, for building a new structure after demo. And I think we have to have both. And I would be surprised if that structure could be if a new structure could be built for $60,000 to $70,000 there, a replacement structure. But I think you've got to come forward and give that information to us for us to be able to consider it.
Okay. So in the on-site meeting, just to you weren't
Yeah, I wasn't able to be there.
We were specifically told that we did not have to have a detailed report from the contractor, that it was a rough estimate of what it would be to rehab. And the contractor is saying what this is that this is the cost to rehab it, and utilizing what we could is the $60,000 to $70,000, but it's essentially going to be a new building. Like, there's very little that can be saved, is what he is saying from that standpoint.
So is it?
So then as
okay.
far as building the new structure, part of what we also discussed is that I was not going to go down the path to do that and to come up with further architectural drawings and what the cost until I know if we can demolish it, like, in all fairness and not like.
Sure. Well, and I'm just and I wasn't there at the meeting, so I don't know what was told to you or what was said. I'm just reading the code itself, and we have to have a comparison, as I read it, for the rehab cost versus the replacement cost. And what I'm hearing from you is it's a wash. It's the same either way.
Yes.
Yeah. And I don't think that meets the standard to demo it then. So I don't think I could support that.
I don't understand why. Like, what?
Okay, well, that's, Susan, you want to comment?
I'll just say, we're calling this a carriage house, and I don't really think that's what this building is. Sorry. The building is so unique, you know, to Franklin, and I don't believe I can support demolition, quite frankly, because even rehabbing it and doing what you're talking about, to me, would be better than tearing the building down.
Brian?
So I do agree from the standpoint that outbuildings, and this is a shed outbuilding, you know, they tell part of the history and the story of a house. We have an engineer's report. The engineer tells us that it's clearly unstable. So we know it's going to take a lot of work. And the part for me that's the sticking point is that if you rebuild that building, you don't have the historic building anymore. You have a new building. And I just sometimes, you know, wonder what's the point of doing that. You haven't really saved the old structure. So I would have to consider the engineer's report and, I mean, whether to demolish or not.
So, what are you saying? You are for the demolition?
I would have to be for the demolition
all right,
if it's going to be a new building.
Well, I think that's in essence what it would be.
Okay.
Kathy? Were you there?
Yes, I was.
Okay.
I did go to the site visit. It was very cold. I would support the demolition of it. I kind of circle around what you're hitting at there, Commissioner Lassiter, but a stronger engineer report. I do, you know, I'm glad Amanda explained this report to us. It's not a typical kind of assembling of comparison between rehabbing it versus new. And so I also understand Commissioner Denton's viewpoint of giving us what we need to do to be able to demolish a building.
Lisa?
And the way I read the guidelines, we can approve demolition if one of the following conditions is met. I feel that the building has certainly lost its architectural and historical integrity, that its removal will not adversely affect the district's historic character, and that the loss of integrity has been substantiated with photographic documentation and physical description of the property that addresses relevant issues. So I would
Mary?
support it.
Yes, I think you're going to practically have to have a new building to make this stand, so I could support demolition.
Okay, and I think Lisa hit on the item. If the building has lost its architectural and historical integrity and removal will not adversely affect the district's historic character, and it won't, in my judgment. And based on what I saw out there, and I think we all agreed at the time, the building is in horrible condition, and it would not be stable to continue on with it. I think the only conversation, and I think Tyler Lamarino talked about it, was that we had to provide some justification to justify demolition other than what our eyes showed us. And I think this does it. Plus the fact you're going to have, as Brian said, you're really not going to have a historic building when you get through fixing it. If you were to fix that building, you'd still have a new structure. So I can support that. And I think also, secondarily, this is not what you want anyway. You want to pull it up closer to the house and make it a useful facility or building, and it's going to have to be raised when you do that. So,
Correct.
You know all that. So I mean, I can support the demolition.
Mr. Chair, I would say that it would be great if staff would make sure that archives got these photographs, because it is such a part of that story and such a one-off for Franklin to have a 19th century home that evidently had some use in the back for something, animals.
Yep,
Thank you.
yep.
Well, I think, of course, the applicant's still going to have to come back to have us formally approve this, but I think the photographs will be effective at that point.
And if I may make a suggestion to the applicant, I think that the information you provided was getting at some of the information that was requested from the DRC during the site visit. But it is difficult to follow, so maybe if there could be something that just explains it a little bit more thoroughly to go in the application. That you say, the first half is for, the roof structure, and the second half is for the structural component for the walls. And this is the number that was arrived at. And perhaps even if the contractor wanted to design it, as Mr. Denton had suggested, or come to the meeting to speak to it, I think that would make a difference as well. Thank you.
Okay, anything else? We're done, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we're ready now for a discussion of partial demolition, alterations, and addition at 265 Natchez Street.
And Mr. Chair, I'm involved in this project.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. And so I think that staff said it's okay if I participate in this conversation, but nothing
Yeah,
else.
I think that's fine.
Is that
So
correct?
I would recommend that you leave this location. If you want to speak as part of the applicant pool, then come on this side. Otherwise, I'd recommend go into the audience, please. Thank you.
Good. If you'll just introduce yourself and hit that green button, or hit the button so it turns green.
Turns green. I'm on.
And don't let Mary speak.
Well, good evening, and thanks for this opportunity to present to you again. My name is Cleveland Salmon. I'm an architect, and I'm representing the African American Historic Committee in Franklin. Our project is for the renovation of the Merrill Williams home. It's a 3,400 square feet, two-story historic residence, and the goal is to renovate it back to its original condition and to use the facility as a community center. At our last meeting, I heard your comments, and we went back and we tweaked our design. The renovation actually will require, if we look at the demolition plans.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
The demolition plans?
The demolition plans. Right here?
Correct.
Okay.
So the goal is to restore the exterior of the building back to its original condition. The front of the building has held up quite well compared to the sides and the rear, which has suffered significant deterioration from weathering. There is more deterioration towards the back of the building where we have the kitchen, and significant water damage is obvious in the den, and in particular, the upstairs bathroom. The floor is sagging, the ceiling is caving in, there's mold, there's rotting, and there's some insect infestation. So the renovation will require converting that space that is in the back, the den, into a rear entry, ADA access, and providing an elevator for ADA access to the upper floor. On the upper floor, the bathroom, again, the floor is deteriorated, the roof, it's leaking. That will be totally demolished and a second floor added for the elevator and provide for an ADA accessible bathroom. You can go to the proposed. Oh, we could stop here. So basically, these are the existing elevation. The dashed line would show the areas of the building that will be removed to make way for the elevator access and the ADA bathroom on the upper floor. The front of the building, again, will pretty much be restored as is. On the left side elevation, the kitchen to the left will be restored as is. What you're seeing to the rear, the fireplace The chimney will be demolished, and the den towards the left will be demolished. Okay, we'd stop here. So again, the goal is to restore the living room, the bedrooms will be restored back to its original condition. We'll make, special effort to, the existing flooring is in immaculate condition. That will be restored. We'll reuse existing fixtures and light fixtures, switches. The fireplace will be restored. What's now the dining room will be converted to a conference room, and the bedrooms will be converted to offices, which will be used by the committee. Towards the back, we will need to provide ADA access. What we did was to tuck a ADA ramp to the back left to provide, which will be just off from the ADA parking, provide stair and a ramp, and the entry would come in on the side to minimize the impact on the existing structure, but still be able to meet code. And then we'll provide the elevator and the ADA accessible bathroom. Based on the structural engineer's report, the den has suffered more than the rest of the building, significant damage from weathering. Plus, to renovate the building, the existing condition just will not meet current code. We would like to use the facility as a community center, which would be more a business. So we have to meet seismic design. The second floor would have to support the elevator, and the existing construction just will not, one, support the elevator, and the structural engineer alluded to the fact that there is significant structural damage to the ceiling and to the walls and the existing roof. We could skip over to the elevations. So some of the comments we had from the last meeting was to be sympathetic and to the existing historical design. And so we did that by using the similar windows, sizes, and design. We try to maintain the same sill and head heights. We also introduced in our new building, in our new addition, similar design features of the existing. The front of the building is actually a two-story residence, and what the designer did back then was they introduced, there's no other way to put it, but fake gable to break that elevation so it appears as a floor and a half. But there's no actual flooring below that roof edge. It's just a design feature to break that wall up. And so we did the same thing with the addition.
And Cleve, I'm trying to pull up a photo that shows that for you. So you can explain that. Give you just a moment.
Okay.
So when you say addition,
So
when you say, oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. I just want to explain what Mr. Salmon had just explained here. So you can see on the photograph on the screen that this is a unique situation. It's a historic configuration where there is a significant eave depth that's been added so that this appears, the upper story appears to be a dormer, when in fact it is flush with the plane underneath
The
it.
exterior wall, it aligns on both floors. So they had the extended roof line gable added, but there's no floor below it. And the only purpose of that is to break that wall up. So it appears to be a floor and a half when it is in fact 2 floors. So that design element was copied into the new addition. I know there was concern that our addition appeared to be a 2-story addition. So that's what we did to the back to break that up. So we still have the full floor height on the upper floor. We also recessed the back wall of the second level. We may have to go to the, to bare minimum that will be required on the upper floor for ADA access and turnaround. There again, trying to minimize the impact of a second floor.
Now, Mr. Salmon, I understand from our conversation last week that you intend to move this wall back another foot. Is that
Yes.
still the case?
And that's
Okay.
done.
Okay, I don't have that set. I only have the set from the last time, but if you could imagine this wall where my cursor is coming back another foot so that it appears to read more as a dormer than it does currently.
Yeah, so it went back to 5 feet. I made it 5 feet 2 inches. We need a 5-foot turnaround for a wheelchair, so we did that. So we have minimal impact on the existing structure. Materials will be similar. The existing is wood siding. We will use wood siding throughout. Existing windows will be restored to their original condition. If it cannot be restored, then we'll replace with a like design, age-appropriate windows. For the new addition, we'll use a similar design to match the existing. What the existing structure also did, they had like a 6-inch wood siding on the ground floor, 4.5-inch on the upper floor. We will continue that language through so that there's continuity, not trying to expand the existing, but just to be sympathetic to the design. We did recess the ground floor 4 inches to make that distinction between here's our historical structure and here's our addition. We did get a letter from Dr. West to support the restoration and the demolition of the den. He thought it was not of the same period and not significant from a historical standpoint.
Did we get that, Amanda?
You did not receive that as part of the
Okay,
application.
all
I
right,
do
that's
have
fine.
it on the screen. So I would ask that
That's
Mr.
that's fine.
Salmon just read some excerpts from it if you would like.
Okay.
So Dr. West is the state historian,
Right.
and he is the executive director of the Center for Historic Preservation, which is housed at Middle Tennessee State University. Very well-respected public historian and preservationist. The letter that you see on the screen, as it relates to the area proposed for demolition, the den area, notes that it is his recommendation that that section be removed and replaced with a handicap accessible entrance and elevator. He does not see the loss of that space undermining any public interpretation of the house as a significant resource to Franklin's history or as a contributing building to the Natchez Street National Register Historic District nomination. A historic space on the first floor, but at the rear of the building, which relates to Fred Williams' story, who is the one of the original or one of the owners of the homes at some point in time, and the civil rights area would be lost. But the gain that you would get for the handicap access to the entire building at the rear could create an effective, appropriate access to the second floor in the 1960s spaces. So it is. He is not a structural engineer or architect, but it is as you see here in his
I would say he's an
recommendation
authority.
that he would support it. There is a structural letter that the applicant did provide to. It was a little bit more open-ended, and it provided information about the state of repair and what would need to be done to repair it. It did not have the cost estimates, but the applicant, to my understanding from our conversation with staff last week, is that they are working with the contractor, Bison, to get a general estimate that could be provided to you at the time of the COA application.
That's fine. I just want to make sure we get Dr. West's letter when they do come before the Historic Zoning Commission.
Okay, yes, we will, yeah, provide that.
Okay.
Unless
Excuse me.
there's anything else that you want to add, Cleve, I'm happy to provide some comments.
No?
Okay.
My name is Alma McElroy, and I'm the president. I'm the president of the African American Heritage Society, and we want to thank you all for allowing us to come a second time and go over the things that we need to do to make this the center that we want it to be and be ready for the final vote next month. So that's why we're here, and we're excited, and we just appreciate the city's support, and we will have the things that we need. We'll have the estimates, and you will have the letter. We'll have all that as part of the package, and hopefully we can get final approval and be ready to start construction. So thank you all so much.
Great. Okay, Amanda.
Thank you. So the applicant has covered most of the comments pretty thoroughly. At the last DRC, there were some comments related to the scale of the addition in relation to the existing structure. It reads as a 1.5-story structure. It is, in essence, a 2-story structure, but it does read as a 1.5-story structure. So the guidance was to provide an addition that would read as 1.5 or smaller per the guidelines. The other guidance requested was more information about the proposed areas for demolition, which I believe the applicant is working to achieve and has provided some of that information to you today. The addition is complicated. This is a complicated project. I did spend some time with the applicants last week in discussing the roof plan and understanding the intent. This is a building that's proposed for civic use, which is totally fine. It meets the zoning as proposed. The hardship is trying to provide the elevator access and still read as a 1.5-story, which has been exceedingly difficult. But I do think that the applicant has been very, very mindful of the guideline and has worked really hard to give you a plan that meets that intent. There have been some other renditions. This was the rendition that the staff felt more comfortable bringing to the DRC for you to discuss today. While the guidelines would not support dormers sitting on the flush with the exterior wall, that is a feature that's already present on this building historically. So in this case, given the context, staff would support the proposal as seen on the screen, especially if this back wall is to be lessened and moved, or about 1 foot of it removed off of it, which is the intent of the applicant to do. That would further read as more of a dormer and less of a second elevation addition. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have for staff. Thank you.
Okay. Susan.
I think this is a great project, and I fully support it. I think you've done a great job of presenting it, and I look forward to the finished product. Thank you.
Thank you.
Josh.
Yep, same, and I would just say, as you've said, have your ducks in the row on the materials you need to provide to us so that we can make a decision under the guidelines.
Thank you.
Brian.
It is a very unique house, and I'm glad to see that it's being saved and how important it's going to be to the district. And thanks for pointing out about that, talk about the uniqueness of it, about how that wall dormer, travels up there too. But I just had a couple of questions, and one was, do you know when the house was constructed, what year? Any idea?
So I have to refer to Dr. West's letter here. The original house, 1909 to 1910.
And the small addition that's proposed to be was it the den that's to be demolished with that chimney that's there? Do we know when that was done?
The den was done in the late 70s,
In
that
the late
addition.
70s. Okay.
So don't even think it's 50 years old yet.
All right. Well, thank you very much. That answered my question.
And that was confirmed by Ms. Cassandra, correct? One of the
Property owner's daughter,
okay.
Kathy.
former property owner's daughter.
I think you've done a beautiful job. My question is, and I found this out recently, the ADA turning radius is no longer 60 inches. It's now 67. So you might want to check that wall and that dormer up there to see how much, maybe you might need that 2 inches, I don't know. But it is now 67.
I will confirm. We have delayed going through codes until we get through this process, so that will be our next step.
Wow. That's important.
Good point. Lisa.
Thank you.
I just wanted to see in one of the photographs the parts that are being proposed for demolition. I'm not clear on that.
Right there.
Okay.
So
So where the cursor is?
Right, where the cursor is, so that the den sticks out, 6 feet or so beyond the kitchen to the right. So we're demolishing to the left, the chimney, that portion, and the upper level, there's a bathroom, yeah, and that has suffered significant water damage, which has permeated down to the lower level. I don't know if we should have a picture on the right side, but there is, that water has come down to that wall and has some damage there.
And that's the portion you said was not constructed till the late 70s? Okay,
That's
so it's
the-
not
that's
within the
addition, right.
50-year mark. Okay.
Right, I think the kitchen was prior to, the kitchen was prior.
Okay.
What I would recommend
Kitchen stay.
as you prepare your application is that you put something in writing that that states what you had mentioned about the date of the addition, and that you also provide to meet another guideline. Additions are recommended to measure no more than 50% of the footprint of the house. So, what the footprint of the house is once that addition's gone, that number would be necessary, and then the footprint of the new addition would be necessary.
Okay, we can do that. The total footprint is 1923.
And then, oh, I'm sorry.
That is 20 by 20, maybe 400 square feet. And I'm just doing some quick math here. And
It doesn't
then
appear to be
minor.
more than 50%, but that is something
Way
that the
less than
commission looks at.
50%. Way less than
We
50%.
just need to show it.
Okay.
Okay, anything else?
I think
I want to say one thing. What I want to say is this house and all of Natchez is quickly transitioning to tear downs. There's been a lot of tear downs, and I just want to make you aware that Shorter Chapel is now redoing the bell tower and have made the decision to save the Green Book House. And I feel like with the Merrill Williams House saved, this is going to be our cornerstone of Franklin's Black history. So very exciting, and we'll have a partnership with the Middle Tennessee State University's Center for Historic Preservation, who will have
Office there.
personnel in this building.
That's
Thank
great.
you.
That's great. All right. If nothing else, thank you very much.
Oh, I just
I
had,
think
Oh.
she was going to
What?
say something.
well, I know Kathy had something, and also I just wanted to ask about, the chimney removal is just the chimney in that one section, is that
Yeah,
right?
yep.
Okay. And
And then, while Lisa was on the demolition clarification too, on one of your elevations, the front elevation shows front elevation demolition, that drawing. Could you point out what's being demoed on the front
Nothing.
elevation? Oh, okay.
Nothing.
Is it the demolition plan that you're looking at, Kathy?
I'm looking at the front elevation demolition on sheet A 2.2.
Thank you.
The
We
title
will make-
underneath it says
we
front
will make
elevation
that-
demolition.
I think that what it meant was that this is the demolition sheet, and
We'll
so
strike that out.
so he'll reword that so it's clear.
Okay, good, because I kept
Thanks
looking at the
for-
little dashes and like, how do I read this? So, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Front
Thanks for-
elevation is important.
Absolutely, nothing will be removed from the front.
Okay.
We will take that off.
Yes.
Okay, anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right, we're ready now for recommendation for conceptual subdivision, the Middle Eight, proposed at 228 Franklin Road. Gary and team. Joe, how are you?
I know.
Did you leave a sunny and warm Chicago?
He did, I know.
Right before Christmas?
I kn- yeah, no, wait, you don't need to report that to us. 3 below here, so,
I think we said that you're away, but we've had delightful
Yeah.
weather in January, and,
well, good.
you know, we're almost home. Once we hit February,
So if I may, before we get started,
Yes.
I want to ask the applicant where they would like for me to load the plan. The plan is very large, and so it takes a while for it to load, and I want to try to expedite.
A1.4, please.
Do you know where that is in relation to this sheet? Down? Okay. So we're just going to architectural plans, okay. See it? Yes. I'm working on getting a stronger computer. There.
Page 22, okay.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Gary Vogren, Kaiser Vogren Design, with our team, Amanda McKeon, Joe Antunovich, and Dwight Kaiser and Charlie Rulick here. Again, thank you for your time this evening. It's really just want to build off the collaboration we had in the last meeting. We specifically talked about the Franklin Road, Liberty Pike View sightline corridor, so that's why I want to pull this image here. We want to talk about that. I'm going to give you some handouts about that and specifically speak about the transition of building height from Franklin Road to Daniels Drive and Jameson. There's a lot of discussion about that. So we've come back with some options for that, elevations, the site study, and want to go through that with you. I'm going to hand these out so you can get through these real quickly, and it's going to be the same images on the screen, but I want to get these to you all if you don't mind. And then we've got another updated model as well we'd like to share with you. So those 3 items, I'll pass these out, and I'll let Joe kind of get into the revisions and ideas we've come up with for this building elevation.
Pass them across, and I
You sure?
think so.
I'll grab one.
Almost.
I'll keep one for myself.
you guys are.
Oh, my God.
Look at that.
We did it.
Success.
Sometimes
Basketball
height
players.
is good.
Yeah.
Were those 2 ex-basketball players?
That's my guess.
I
don't-
shouldn't say
oh,
ex, you probably still play.
Well, I was quarterback. I was not a basketball player.
Yeah, years ago.
What high school did you go?
High school.
What high school did you go?
Willoughby South.
Okay. Well,
I'll pass this over, bud.
thank you for this evening. Thrilled to be back with you. I think last time we said we'd like to make this very collaborative and bring you along with process on the design. Last time we were here, you asked to see some additional materials, and despite the cold Christmas and the cold New Year, we were able to make the submission, and I think we have some exciting things to show. One of the first item you asked to see was sightlines down Liberty Pike from Franklin Road. And what you have in front of you, we have it up on the screen also. We took a photograph along Liberty Pike. And the bottom of the image is about 100 feet from the intersection to Franklin Road. So you can see the access point to the factory on the left there, right by the first lighting pole. So we've shown the existing conditions with Jameson Station at the end of the sightline. As you know, Liberty Pike takes a curve at that point, and what we've done is roughed in as accurately as we can. We took the computer and roughed in our buildings as accurately as we could on the site, on the existing photograph, and then reproduced that in this drawing down below. The first buildings on the right would be our townhome buildings, and those are 338 feet from the intersection of Franklin Road and Liberty Pike. And then the buildings, the 2+1 and the 4+1s, because of the perspective you see and then the slight difference in grade is illustrated here going down. Now, we've not just let this lie. We've actually made a model, two models that illustrate this massing better. But you did ask for the sightline study, and we've come forward with that to show you what the overall massing of our buildings would be in relationship to the view corridor that's there presently. So that's the first sheet.
And would you mind spending a little bit more time on that and helping me point out to them what they're looking at? I see where the townhomes are pointed at, but can you point out the other two buildings and what they're seeing there?
Yes,
please?
thank you. To the right, and you'd never really see this because of all of the landscaping that we have, the existing landscaping that we will be keeping in the 75-foot setback from the Truitt House, you can start to see the single-family homes, and we've just put those in the outline to give you an idea of the scale and the mass. But in reality, when there's leaves on the trees that you see above, you won't be able to see those houses at all. But going beyond the townhome in the foreground would be building number 1, which is a 2 levels with 1 level above, 3 stories in total, right behind the townhomes. And then going on a little further would be our 4-story building plus 1, and then Jameson Station all the way at the end. Our last building, I think as I mentioned last time, that our building that would be closest to Jameson Station on Daniels is approximately 2.5 feet taller than Jameson Station. But on the perspective here, it would appear to be approximately the same height.
Yeah, so just to clarify, Amanda was asking, the building you see on Liberty Pike is the terminus of Jameson Station. That building is your dominant feature that you see in that architectural rendering. And also to note that the first bank of townhomes are 338 feet back from Franklin Road intersection as well.
And Jameson Station with Daniels, Daniels Street right in front of it, going off to the right down the hill. Oh, L111? Okay. So we wanted to blow up the facade along Liberty Pike from the edge of our improved property all the way down to Daniels. And so this is a copy of the site plan at a slightly larger scale than what we had shown last time. Jameson Station on the right, Daniels Drive are right alongside of it. And then you can see the setbacks that we have on our proposed development all the way around. Substantial setbacks along Daniels Drive to our buildings. And you can see with the turn of the buildings and how we only bring certain parts of the buildings to the street with these large landscape courtyards, we really have a lot of interruption of our buildings that lie on Liberty Pike, and they create these wonderful, marvelous landscape courtyards as we go along Liberty Pike. And then this private, should I say, this new street that we put in, going all the way through our property with setbacks from the street. This is a brand-new city street that we will be constructing with setbacks, appropriate setbacks from each of the residences, sidewalks, lighting, trees, landscape. and going all the way over to the west side, on the left-hand side of the drawing, showing townhomes on Liberty Pike, showing 3 individual single-family homes. That is part of the 75-foot setback from the Truett House. And then a collection of duplex and single-family homes that run along the south side of the property with a stormwater retention field and a wonderful structure in the middle of that. So, and then the rather substantial landscaping all the way to our neighbors to the south. Next slide, which would be A 1.0.
Go ahead.
Are we up? Okay.
Yep, we're good.
You asked for, I think last time we just came with some blocked out elements of the buildings along Liberty Pike. And so what we've come forth with today is we've rendered these much more accurately with the materials, with the colors that we would be using, and showing the relationship of Jameson Station, Daniels Drive, the East Residential Building, the West Residential Building, and the townhomes along Liberty Pike. This is the scheme that we came to you with last time. We've not made any changes to it other than colored the buildings and shown them very accurately in elevation. The West Residential Building site is approximately 10 feet taller than the East Residential Building site. There's a portion of Liberty Pike that's elevated at that point, so that pushes that building up in the air a little further. As we mentioned last time, there's approximately 2.5 feet difference in our proposed elevation between the East Residential Building, Daniels Drive, and Jameson Station. And you can see below on the dimensions that we've made along Liberty Pike, our buildings are between approximately 28 feet to 30 feet. The corners of the buildings are approximately 28 to 30 feet back from the curb all the way along Liberty Pike, which is rather substantial. And you might go out there today and say, well, how far back is Jameson Station? The building itself, as it rises up for its full height, is 21 feet back of the curb compared to what we have, 28 to 30 feet. But on the ground floor, on the first floor, there's an arcade with columns, and those columns are set back almost 14 feet. So as you drive around on Liberty Pike, that building appears rather close on the sidewalk. That's something that we do not intend to do. Our buildings are set back. In many cases, they are at an angle to Liberty Pike. And with these courtyards, these generous courtyards, we feel that we've softened the whole approach of our building design as it meets Liberty Pike.
May I ask a question really quickly?
Yes.
In speaking to that, on that partial street plan, you said the Jameson Station building, the existing building, is 21 feet back. Is that from the street?
From the curb line, yes.
Okay,
the
from the
face of
curb line. And the
These-
numbers you're providing for yours are really from the sidewalk, not from the street?
No, these dimensions that we illustrate here are all from the face of curb.
Okay. I
Everything's
just want to make sure I
comparable.
understood, because you're showing a median within Liberty Pike that's not there currently.
Right.
That's why it was, okay. Just
We
want to
were-
make sure.
Well, the median is there now. It's just, on this plan, we showed it as landscape, but the
Yes.
median is there.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, thank
Yeah.
you for clarifying.
Sure.
Yes, we are great supporters of the factory district plan, and so we want to show you a bucolic scheme. In fact, as we're talking about it right now, the plan, what exists there is the wider bike path and sidewalk that sits on our property.
Correct.
It sits there today.
Well, not yet, no. It's a current 6-foot, 5-foot sidewalk. We would be anticipated to do a 12-foot multi-purpose trail if required.
Right, and we would encourage it, especially because of the impediment you get into when you come in front of Franklin, in front of Jameson Station. We would encourage moving that wider multimodal path to the other side of the street where we have more space. But I think that's something that could be discussed further as part of the
Yeah.
overall factory district plan. You asked, one question that we had last time was also, could you develop the larger building, the east residential building, so that it was only expressed as 3 stories with that penthouse level? And so if you go to the next slide, is that A 1.1? Is that up?
Correct.
Is that up there? So the reason we printed it out for you, you can really get your eyeballs down on this rather than looking at it on the screen. But what we've done is we've articulated the building so that that first level is expressed as a single level. They could be 2-level. They could be developed so that the glass goes all the way up and is divided into and expressing 3 levels that protrude out right onto Liberty Pike, and that's illustrated here in the east residential building, keeping the building the same height, but actually going to a 3+1, and then alongside the 2+1 building, which is the west residential building. So we've articulated this, and we would be prepared, if you like this option, we would be prepared to articulate the buildings in that manner.
Now, does everyone understand what they're looking at? I think, does everyone? Because we can spend more time on that.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Well, let me make sure that I understand that. So the others are 4 stories with a setback, and it's at the height of 57 feet. And the one with 3 stories is just a higher first story. It's the same height.
That's correct.
It's just different stories.
We may have, like facing Liberty Pike, we may have a higher level within the unit, but it would be pulled back substantially from the glass. As you would look in and look at these units here, you would get the impression that that's 1 story. If the lights were on at night, as an example, you'd get a taller first floor, and then you would have 2 levels above there. It wouldn't be expressed as 4 levels, it would be expressed as 3 levels.
But the height is the same.
The height is exactly the same, yes.
It's disguised as 3 levels.
See, that's why we printed this out at a larger scale. We didn't want there to be
Yeah.
any.
Well, that's why I wanted to ask the
No,
question,
that's fine.
because it is different than what you normally
So,
see.
Mr. Chair, you're saying that what your change is A 1.1.
There's a couple different
That's an
options they
option.
want to talk
That's
through
an
right now.
option.
So right
Okay.
now,
It's
A
the
point,
next
You might like the first one. We'd
the
like to
next
bring
page.
you along
Okay.
with how we've
That's it.
looked at this
Oh, I'm
since
supposed
last
to look at
time.
the next
We-
page.
so we haven't
This-
gone
this
to
is
the
it.
next page yet, but
Oh.
A 1.1 is the
It's right
same
under here.
height as what was brought forward to the DRC for consideration last month. But the bottom floor height is more reminiscent of a commercial building storefront. So we'll have a
That's-
taller floor at the bottom.
Right.
It will not function as a storefront. As far as
Yeah,
I
no
understand, the intent is to do multifamily only. But it
And-
would have a ceiling height that's comparable to a commercial building on the bottom floor.
And thank you for bringing that up, Amanda, because at Jameson Station, the first floor, it's not quite as tall as what we would make it, because these grades are kind of difficult, because some of the buildings dig into the site a little, and some of them are slightly above the site. We've got 2 levels of parking below, and to have all of these things line up and all, it's kind of you were talking about that historic building being so complicated. I wish everything would be that complicated. This is really, really a toughie. But Jameson Station has approximately 18 feet on that first floor. as you look in, it was originally intended to be commercial. So, so that is correct. This is what we're doing here is expressing a height that's reminiscent of that. So when you look at Jameson Station and say, hey, it's 3 levels plus 1, but you're up at 54'6", and we're just a few inches above that, 30 inches above that. So with this drawing here, so. So we've left on this scheme, we've left the west residential the same, and this is essentially so if you were looking at a model, if you had a model of this and you were looking at the massing, the first scheme and this scheme would be exactly the same in height.
So
Okay?
can you clarify what the height of that floor, the bottom floor, is proposed to be on a 1.1?
That total floor would be approximately 22 feet.
Okay, and then you said Jameson Station is about 18?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
about 18, and that's where we start to get some of the differences in height.
Absolutely.
Okay, so theirs is not quite as tall as what we would have. And you can see the left side of the residential building, see it comes out of the ground a bit, and the right side goes in the ground. We've shown the elevation of the street because the street goes up on an angle, and there's almost a 10-feet drop across the site where the west residential building is. So that site is up higher. You never see it like this. That's why it drives me nuts actually making drawings like this. But
Well, it is very helpful having the grade demonstrated like this. Thank you.
well, and then you asked specifically, can't you show this in 3 dimensions? And so we got a little surprise for you. We got a little, we brought a little gift today. Did we unpack that one yet? Is it ready to go? Okay. So
They worked over the holidays.
okay. Yeah, thank you, Amanda. So and then I made a suggestion the last time. I said, well, what would happen if we took a level off the east residential building and slipped it over to the west residential building? And here we're being so truthful that we actually don't like it. Even though these buildings are the same height, because the west residential building sets on a site that's 10 feet higher, it gives the impression as you're going up. Now, this is not San Francisco, mind you, but, it is, we want it to be accurate and show you what happens, that there is about a 10-foot difference in that middle site that actually goes up. So we made this drawing, and then we were curious what that looked like in 3 dimensions also. But again, this goes back to simply taking a level off of our preferred scheme, which is the first scheme, the east residential building, and this is then 3 plus 1, and then we have 3 plus 1. The west residential building also, because of what I talked about, just making the floors line up, sits out of the ground a couple of feet, whereas the east residential building goes into the ground a couple of feet. So you get these different dimensions working. So don't ask me to say, is it explicitly this or explicitly that, because they're on a sloping site. So then we went even further, what gluttons for punishment. We made models at a larger scale, because we brought the old, did you bring the old massing model, Charles? I'll take that one. You might want to hand the other one. So we came last time with this model, and it showed the massing in the whole vicinity, the whole neighborhood, so to speak, the entire factory district. But, and even though it's nice and looking at the elevations and all, if you just make a little error, it doesn't accurately show the massing. So what we did was we made the massing scheme of the first 2 options. Remember,
And what option are they looking at right now?
That's the same as the.
they're looking at the options for the first 2 elevations that are shown So it would be what, the scheme that we showed last time, the 4+1 plus the 2+1 building. And then,
A1,
remembering the mass would also be the same.
Jim, you're right.
Do you mind if we?
A10.
Do you mind if we
A10.
slow down
This
just
is
a little
A10.
bit and let them pass this through? I don't want to confuse too much.
Okay.
Okay.
That's
So,
what this is.
so
You
what's
want me
being,
to slow down, is it?
what,
I know, but I want them to understand what they're looking at in relation to this sheet. in
Remember
front
where
of
you
them. I think if we go
Are we
too
doing
fast.
okay? Jim, are we on this, Jim?
You're doing okay. You
Mr.
got to
Chair.
slow down for us. Remember where we are.
Mr. Chair, so we're looking at A10 and
Yeah.
A11.
Yes.
That's
Because they're the
correct.
same mass.
But
They're
this,
both the
this
same-
model is A10.
But it's the same massing.
The model-
Yeah, same mess.
This is the model. we
Yeah,
showed
you're
last time.
just changing the skin.
That's
on
right.
A1.
That's correct.
See, I'm so, that's right.
That's right. You're gonna be quizzed on this later.
You're doing
so-
good, Mary.
And this model is the same, that's just blown up.
And what's
Yeah.
this one?
This is the.
Well, this one,
We've had models before.
The A1 too?
I had to do this
Okay.
for streetscape.
But this one shows in relation to the factory.
So make sure you're using your microphones, everyone. And again, Charles, can you stop? Let them get through this first. I'm really,
Yeah, no, let's do- let's-
don't want to confuse
Which one is
anybody.
that? Is that A11?
Who are we listening to right now?
Let's clarify.
well, we're gonna let this one come around.
Okay.
All right, so
Yes,
I'm
thank you.
following,
I'm chief
I'm
here.
following sharp on this
That-
one, Jim,
that's-
if it's okay.
that's good.
Mr. Chair, I have to leave at 5:10, it's 6:10
Okay.
to pick up an 8-year-old little girl.
So
across
how-
the street.
16,
how
all
much
right.
time?
So
So do you,
I've got about-
well, let's,
I just want them to have the benefit of my thoughts
all right.
as well.
Well, why don't you go on and make them?
Okay, I'll make them, which are not.
Would
the
you
mo-
wanna, why don't you show them this one too, all right?
Yeah.
Just,
good?
yes.
Yes.
Just show it to me.
Yeah, because,
Yeah, just show it.
Just show it to him. We can,
So.
It really is just to help you guys.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to help you guys.
This is good. One, too?
Yes.
Okay, yep.
so,
My comment, I looked at, I could tell from a distance what it was. My comment is, this is the best thing you've done, in my opinion,
Which is.
showing the
first one.
rendering
Yes.
with it imposed from, for
Yes.
me, that's the most helpful from a view shed. Like, this is all great, but and it's important, but we're never gonna see it exactly like this.
True.
I think coming
Yeah.
off of Franklin Road, that's super helpful for me.
Excellent.
From that. What I noticed you didn't give us, which I think a lot of us probably would want, is option A13, which is keeping the west residential building at 36 and making the east residential building at 46, just to see it for scale. I know that's not what you all want to do. I know it may not be workable for other reasons, but I think that, to me, that was, all this is helpful from a massing standpoint to see it. I'd be surprised that we'd get behind having that first building be 47 feet. So it would be interesting to see that lined up, but that plays into losing a story somewhere, and I know you all don't want to do that. So,
well, we'd like not to. Would-
yeah,
If there's some possible way that we could shuffle these around and not lose density, because I'll just be frank, I mean, we're building 2 levels of below-grade parking. This site plan would look completely different if we had to take 1 level out and put parking on grade.
yeah,
With our substantial setbacks, that's 75 feet that we go back to the Truett House and all the way around our neighbors to the south. I mean, these are very generous setbacks, and we're putting in a new street.
Yeah.
So, to get all of that, it's, I feel like I'm begging here, but it's hard to just justify that cost of going down those 2 levels of
right.
2 levels of parking with the density that we're left with.
Yep.
That's basically where we're at. And
I
I'm
hear
just
you.
being
I think
frank.
all this is from my perspective, just so you have the benefit of it. I think it's all very helpful. I'm not entirely sure exactly what I could support sitting here right now without thinking about it a little bit more. But I do commend you. All this is very fancy and is very helpful. But I think this old-fashioned giving us the view in was the most impactful for me.
So I've got
Josh, Very good.
Before you go, can I say something?
Yes,
Because I know
ma'am.
you're going.
Yeah.
And we're going to keep discussing. I think as we consider too is, and this is conversations we're having with everybody in our neighborhood, is, because you asked, Mr. Roberts, we'll lose about 30 units on that floor, which doesn't sound like a lot. But I know Envision Franklin's goal is, in some ways, let's build up, not out. And when we start to consider how much land would it take in walkable Franklin, that you can walk to downtown Franklin to get 30 homes. I think that's the thing that we all are, would just want us to all consider. We know this is an ask. You think we don't know? We know. And we are asking it. We just want our community to consider it.
Yeah. I'm
And-
not saying I wouldn't support it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
No, as
I'm
you're
reserving-
thinking about
Yeah,
it, that
yeah.
is, you asked, it's about 30 homes.
Yeah.
So, like, if we want, that, I just want you to be thinking about that.
Right. Thank you. I
As- I
appreciate
know
that. And I'm
those
sorry that I
eight-year-olds
have to
are
excuse
calling.
myself. Yes.
Well, and Amanda said to me earlier today, she said, well, Joe, maybe we could, I never thought she'd ever say that, but she said, maybe we could push the buildings closer and this and that, and we'd lose some of these courtyards and all, and I just, you don't get as good. I think we've labored over this a long time, and we've given this our best professional shot, and there's a much larger group than I'm just a spokesman for a very large team, and so we've come to, even though we call it the middle eight, we've kind of come to a middle ground here that I think you can sense where we're at. I think as you might want to take a look at this other model. Can we send this one around?
Sure, so everyone's
Yeah.
done with this one, or you had a
Right.
question, right, Kathy? Okay, you're still looking at it.
Right, so we could,
So that, my understanding is
A10, right?
A1.0.
So I have a question to the architect. So what is the middle ground? You mentioned the middle eight and the middle ground. What are we doing? We're talking about so many here. So what are we discussing? We're not discussing townhomes, we're discussing the actual buildings.
well, I think the last time we were here, we heard a lot of unanimity on how we've planned the site and how we planned the periphery of the site. That's one of the reasons why we showed this site plan, L1.11. And we took away from the last meeting that the way we've handled the periphery of the site has been well done. And the question is really the relative heights of the larger buildings as they sit on Liberty Pike and their relationship to Jameson Station. That was what we took away from the last meeting.
I think that's accurate. That's accurate.
And I think we're coming back and saying, we've had meetings with other people. We've discussed this with the councilman, the alderman. The alderman, and he's actually he says, hey, if there's anywhere that I would recommend that we add height, it would be where you've got your number 3 building, closest to Daniels and to Liberty Pike. So we've heard that a couple of times now because there's been precedent set with Jameson Station. We also like the way that it transitions down. I think you can see from that model that we have there. It's got a nice transition. It goes from Jameson Station, our mass, it goes to buildings 1 and 2, and then the relationship between buildings 1 and 2 and the single-family homes and the townhomes that we have on the west side of New Street, and then the way in which those single-family homes transition to the Truett House, we like that relationship very much. That's the scheme that we favor. That's the scheme that if there was any way that the board would consider a recommendation to move forward with that as your preliminary recommendation for appropriateness, that's what we would be asking for.
So I wanted to clarify with that, because that's what I was kind of asking for. So I'm looking at, what, A1 point zero, and then I'm looking at A1.1. What is your proposal, of what is the middle ground?
Well, what we tried to, that would be the middle ground where we would make those first four units higher and expressed as A 1.1. Because I think that what we did take away from the last time, and albeit for me to be summarizing like this, you were having trouble with the 4+1. And so we came up with an option here that illustrated that building as 3+1. And if that's what would make you feel more comfortable with that building, we would be only too happy to move ahead with that building.
So I think my concern, last time we were together, had to do with the height and not so many of the stories, knowing that if you took a story away, your height wouldn't be as extreme.
Right.
But I would say, now stylistically and architecturally, what's visually appealing, having that first story with a higher ceiling height, does add to appeal to that building. It doesn't look as crowded with windows up and down and side to side.
We
So,
agree.
I mean,
We agree.
I think that is stylistically that is nice, but we still have the issue of the height that we would have to get through. But you said that the first story is 22 feet. The ceilings are 22 feet.
Well, that's because we would have areas in the back of that unit where there would be.
Like a loft?
Yes, a loft. So we wouldn't want to give up the ability to have that away from the glass so that, you'd have the large spaces and then we'll be able to step back.
Susan.
So that's the middle ground, A1.1, and that's what you're proposing.
That's right.
Thank you.
Susan?
I really need to hear Amanda's take on this, quite frankly.
Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate what you've proposed. Did you have any other elevations that you wanted to show today?
Well, just the other model. Did it go around?
This one did not.
Yeah, let's go ahead and have that go around.
And which one is this model?
This is the,
This
the
is
last
A 1.2.
This is with an extra story
On the west building.
on the
Correct.
Where
west
both
building.
buildings would be the same height above grade, except obviously the one site is slightly higher than the other site.
Is your assessment on that?
Right.
Yeah.
And I appreciate us slowing this down just a little bit. I could sense that there might be some, because the amount that we're talking about, it's better just to kind of slow it down, make sure everybody can compare what they're holding in their hand with the sheet in front of them. So thank you for that. So this is the proposal that the applicant tried to see how that would look and does not want to pursue.
That's correct.
And that's largely because of the additional height that it puts on the west elevation, and it loses the transition that is on the preferred set.
Well, and we don't want to dismiss all of what we've heard here. There are some concerns that were raised from a historic standpoint that we actually step the buildings as we come closer to Franklin Road, as we come closer to the historic area. And that difference between the single-family homes and that first building, that's a very important relationship.
It is.
And
So-
I think you brought that up.
Absolutely. And I do think there's still some confusions that I want to make sure that we're clear. The model that's going around right now is a model that shows 3 stories with a 4th recessed on each of the larger buildings. The applicant tried that to see if that would help address some of the concerns of the DRC, and the applicant does not feel comfortable with that. And I could say that staff does not feel comfortable with that. So that model is not being proposed right now, but they wanted to show it to you to show that they did try to take that into account.
But that is what is shown on A12.
Yes.
So we're all
Yes,
knowing what page we're
A1.2.
looking at. So
That's right.
So that you can put an X on that one. That is not one that they are
Okay.
proposing to bring forward
That's
at
good.
this time.
Unless somebody here says, I love this.
I don't,
Absolutely
I'm not,
not.
I'm not hearing
No,
that.
No.
Thank you. So the model that went by before that, that model corresponds with a
1-0.
1.0 and 1.1.
That's correct.
So a 1.0 is what you saw at DRC last time. And that is the building closest to the intersection, the west building.
Oh, yeah, okay.
It's 2 stories with a third recessed. And to speak to Ms. Besser's question, staff does support that. That is a great scale and transition for this area. The next building, the east building, that's the one that's closest to Jameson Station, is proposed at either 4 with a 5th recessed, or at the very same height, 3 with a 4th recessed. The only difference would be how they articulate the bottom floor. The bottom floor on the 3 with the 4th recessed would be a 22-foot height, comparable to a commercial building. I think that's a little taller than most commercial buildings in the area, but that is the intent that they bring forward to help visually diminish the scale in relation to the buildings on either side of it. It is taller than the guidelines support. It is still taller in scale than the design policies for the Franklin Road Historic District support. And I believe that it does not meet Envision Franklin as written currently, but the applicant intends to apply for an amendment at the March meeting of the Planning Commission.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Amanda.
Amanda, could you make one clarification on the height
Sure.
between Jameson Station or adjacent buildings with, per the design guidelines, saying that it's higher than that, but what's the guidelines that stating that?
So the design guidelines and policy section states that 1 to 2 stories is appropriate in the area, but because there is Jameson Station at 3 with the 4th recessed, a comparable in height with the west building as proposed on a 1.0, staff would feel comfortable with that. Now, I do understand that there is a height in scale ridge of what is on the block face. And so that Jameson Station is not on that block face, as there's a road in between. And so it gets a little hairy in trying to calculate that. So the only thing on that block face would be the existing Truett Historic Building. If you were to look across the street, you have the factory, which is a tall 2 and 1 in many places. And so it would be interesting to see what those height comparisons might be. So maybe that would be something the commission would like to use if so inclined.
Yeah, I think we documented those last time, the heights of the factory. If I just may add one point to that. If you were walking on the sidewalk along Liberty Pike and you were next to Jameson Station, right by the curb on the sidewalk, and you looked up at Jameson Station, because the building is significantly closer to and it's continuous, it's all the way flat, there's no recesses except in between the 2 buildings. You've got that long facade that's 21 feet above, but then the arcade is 14 feet behind the curb. Then you would come to the building that we have, which is 30 inches taller, but it's set back 27'6", 28 feet, with these large courtyards. I would have it to you to say that our building will appear shorter if you're walking on the sidewalk than Jameson Station would appear. And I'm just giving you my professional opinion on that.
And I would like to add to you that page 1.1 with the bottom floors expressed differently does seem to, if you flip between the 2, it does seem to have an effect on the perceived height. It really does. I haven't reviewed this in light of the zoning ordinance, and the colors make a big difference in this, and the commission doesn't review colors, so that is one thing that can be helpful, but not necessarily unless the commission asks for the color is related to the material itself. But the zoning ordinance, I'm sorry, the design guidelines and the Envision Franklin document just do not support the three with the fourth recessed.
Susan, did you want to now make some comments?
Well, I appreciate your comments, Amanda, and I think that's where I am with this, is that I appreciate the adjustments that you've made, but I feel like it's just not there yet, and I realize there's, in terms of real estate, you have to have something, so many units, and I appreciate that as well. But regardless, this is going to change that corner dramatically. I mean, and yes, we have the factory across the street, we have Jameson down the street, but I think that we have to be really careful how we approach this, because it's going to be a huge change for that corner. And this A1.1, having the first story read, or the first story read higher, does relate more to the Jameson building. And I think that's probably the best thing you have going for it. I still have a concern about the height. Thank you.
Brian? Anything else?
The only thing, Mr. Chair, and that's actually kind of it's on A1.3, which shows the homes, the townhomes, just making sure that on the plan that we're being submitted here, that we're still seeing that first home that really relates closer to the Truitt house at a lowered height. That was, first it was proposed at a higher elevation, and then it was lowered, and we're still seeing that.
That's the lowered elevation.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, we made that correction.
Yeah, that's the lower elevation.
And just for curiosity, what modification of standard is being requested? I mean, what is your modification of standard that's being requested?
So they are not requesting a modification of standards, they're requesting an amendment to the land use plan Envision Franklin document. It is not for use. The use is proposed at multifamily, which is supported at this location, but the land use plan amendment is being proposed to create the factory district, which I know a lot of us haven't heard a lot about yet, but that is going to the Planning Commission in March, and I'm sure that will. Okay, so Ms. Pierce is holding up a flyer. It appears that there is a workshop. Is it a public workshop? That is being held on February the 16th at.
We don't know. The alderman.
That's something the city set up internally. That's a city coordinated meeting.
Ms. Dannenfelser can speak to that.
Thank you. We plan to provide an update to our Board of Mayor and Aldermen next week related to a public meeting that we plan to have about a proposed vision for the factory district, which is larger than this site or the factory itself, but maybe some surrounding properties, and we plan to engage the community. Our Envision Franklin consultant is going to be leading that meeting, and it's at the factory in February.
Thank you. Is that all you did?
That's it.
Mary, you want comments?
Yes, I just want to say, to my knowledge, this is the largest residential infill project that's ever happened in downtown Franklin. Is that a correct statement? I think.
Since I moved here.
Isn't it? I believe it is. So I just want to say that I can't get my brain around how this is going to, I think it looks wonderful. I think the changes that were made look wonderful. Okay, I just keep going. I'm going to visit someone. Where do I park? At the Jameson station, there's a parking garage and a outdoor parking plaza. And to me, what I can't get comfortable with, the The drawings are beautiful. I like what you did on the A11. I just can't understand in a real world how this functions. Everyone goes in the parking garage. Maybe I just think of my neighborhood, Charlton Green, and I think how fast the on-street parking fills up because we're on smaller lots. I can't understand the function of it. I don't understand how we approve the design without understanding the function. I feel like we're in a situation where we're approving something without understanding how does this really all work? So
I apologize if we haven't gone over that before. We have 2 levels of parking fully underneath the 3 larger buildings.
that part.
We've also got street parking in this new street.
How many?
And while we're not relying on those, if you are a visitor here, and you will let the concierge know that you have a visitor coming, when that person pulls up to the entrance to the parking, they will be admitted to the parking. We have enough space for visitor parking in those two underground parking levels. So it will be very easy. You come in on the new street, and there is a separate entrance for each of these buildings to enter and park as a visitor, very close to the elevators, and that will be coordinated with security. You'll let them know the car number and all, and they'll be let in to park. As far as if there's a delivery to one of these homes around the periphery, there's ample space, parallel parking for, heck, we get more deliveries of packages to our house than I think the mailman comes. There'll be spots that they can pull over and actually run in with a package also.
And
We
they'll be
also-
designated for that because?
Yes.
Okay.
We have, between our 2 entry points to the buildings, we actually have a large area where there will be mail, package delivery, and that will all be coordinated in a very sophisticated manner with a full-time staff that we will have within the garage area.
But to Mary's point, where on, I'm looking at L12, where are the parking entrances
Okay,
on
look
these
at-
3 buildings?
Look at L11. L1.
Yes, L1.11.
That's correct.
How about that?
Right. So if you follow the new street around.
Right.
And then what we call is Building 2, which is the westernmost building as you come around the curve. Right in the center of the building is an entry drive shown in gray. That's where you will enter the building.
I'm not seeing that.
Right there, middle.
Wait a minute, we're,
Right there in the middle.
Oh,
The mid-block. So that's an entry and an exit for the garage.
oh, I got you, okay.
Mid-block of building 15 on the plan.
So if you look at the flat areas on the 3D model,
And there's the other.
So you just won't drop in here. It will be more of a gated situation where I'm going to have to call someone.
The security will start at that garage door. Now, we can make arrangements ahead of time, and all of these details are yet to be worked out. But our idea is
like you
that's
go
where
into
the
the
security
gated stuff.
begins.
But there will be a section in the front here for drop-off visitors and guests that's outside of the gate.
Mary, I so appreciate that you're asking, how does this function? We worked for hours and hours on how does this function. It is, there are a couple things that are very important. Number one, that when you pull in, we did a whole page in our vision book on what the garage amenity would look like. In that when you come in underground, you are coming into a very secure place, and there's also a place for visitors. I think the other thing that's huge is I have a child that's in a wheelchair. dealing with, and also we have parents that we want to take care of, dealing in a situation where there are no steps, there are elevators. So you come into that garage, you walk into an underground lobby that is absolutely secure, and you go on an elevator, you're not dealing with stairs, which is, is important. If I want to keep my
Yes.
mother close, we can live in Franklin and she can live in one of these units in a very secure, safe, no stairs way. I think how it all functions, we could spend 3 hours showing you how it all functions. There's 6 elevators in this thing. They're making sure that you are met by somebody when you walk in. And we would love to spend that time. It's exhausting though. So, but I love that you're like, well, how does this thing, how does this work? We can show you how it works if you have the
But
time.
it's single access is what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
Single access underground for both of these buildings.
No, there's two. There's two. There's one at each of the buildings. The other one is underneath the pool.
Here it
Where the
is.
pool's located.
Okay, here it is. I got
Okay,
it. Back
so
in.
there's one there and one there. You come in.
Okay, I
In
got it.
between there is this central lobby and that's at the lowest point because this site slopes 20 feet. So that visitors can come in there and go up elevators to each of the buildings underground. It's not a flat site, so there are real.
Yeah, and then all the parking is all connected. You come in both access, but you can cross pollinate, so to speak,
Gotcha.
cross park between the buildings. And then you would ask Mary about how many parallel spaces there are on the street. There's around 40 to 43 spaces for on-street parking or loading, things of that nature for the perimeter residential as well. So they have those dedicated spaces, as well as their driveways for parking and garages.
Right.
What else you got?
Well, I do like that a 1.1 better. I do think this is a huge character change for Franklin, and I would probably love that we were looking at what this whole factory district were instead of picking out what's going to be probably the gateway development and looking at it separately. But but it's well done. Thank you.
So,
Lisa.
Ms. Pierce, if I could, and I apologize, Mr. Chair, am I hearing that you would prefer or you would feel more comfortable providing a recommendation on the development plan once you understood better what the factory district proposal is from the applicant or from the city?
I don't think I know enough to say that right now.
Okay.
I just
But somehow, all
want to
these
say
pieces
this
have
is
got to come together.
profound. This is a profound development.
Yes.
It's a profound character change for Franklin as far as housing.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess Arlington is the closest.
Harpeth?
No.
No?
Not really,
in
because
size.
it's got a lot of public use in it.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I didn't know what you meant, if you meant density or if you meant use. Okay.
I just meant the way it's going to be used.
Okay.
And the Arlington will capture more on-street parking. So thank you.
Thank you.
One of the things that perhaps could be considered is in the preliminary recommendation, subject to further coordination with the factory district overall master plan, because we are showing, for instance, we're not being presumptuous enough to show that Daniels will be a four-way intersection here. But everyone's kind of agreed to that. But because we don't own that property, we've not shown it like that. Somebody mentioned we've shown a green median here. We even brought up moving the wider intermodal pedestrian path to the other side. You mentioned perhaps on-street parallel parking. Those things are going to take some study, but we'd like not to come to a screeching halt
I
with our
understand that.
plan
That's
as
why-
those things are considered. But we will need to coordinate with them as we're continuing to develop the plan.
Lisa?
Ms. Pierce used the word gateway, and she is correct. This is a gateway into historic Franklin. And we are being asked to make a recommendation strictly on mass and scale, and whether or not this is going to be consistent with the historic district. And on all those counts, I just don't see how something of this magnitude is going to satisfy those requirements. To point to an exhibit that I mention it only because of all the exhibits, this is probably the only one that comes even close to anything that I feel is consistent with this, the historic guidelines. And that would be your exhibit A12 with the 1-story over 3-story on the east and with a 1 over 2 on the west. And I know you don't want to hear that. I'm sorry, but that's my input.
Kathy?
So that's not rendered.
It's
Because
not
it's not rendered. What Ms. Marquardt is saying, if 1.2 was altered so that east building looks as it does now, but the west building loses a story. That is what she's saying.
Yes, thank you, Amanda.
Kathy?
1 plus 3, 1 plus 2 is what she's saying.
Okay. I like a 1.1. To me, I think it's getting over. Oops, sorry. It's deciding 30 inches in difference in height. And you certainly can't add any more height to the west building because that's on the crest of the slight curve of the section. I think the east building on a 1.1 is stunning with the 3+1. That looks, is there any way to minimize, split the 30 inches? I don't know. But that's hard to grasp that if it's still taller than Jameson Station. I think perception has a whole lot to do with this too, Amanda, and we've all kind of been talking a little bit about that too. And I think the beauty of the east building is that it is kind of cocked on an angle so that it doesn't read full face front like building, the west building. And so minimizing the height on the west building, I think, is the way to go too. Good suggestion by Commissioner Marquardt with maybe can we reduce the west building to a 2+1? Not sure how those numbers would work, but it would give an overall lowered scale to the whole cityscape.
And Kathy, you mean the east building, correct?
No.
Okay.
The west building. On sheet A 1.2, it's currently a 3+1. Lisa
Okay.
mentioned making that a 2+1.
So where they're actually proposing a 1.1. So can we look at that one and make comments from that?
1.1.
They do not want to go with 1.2.
I understand.
Okay.
I'm talking about, yeah, they want to do 2.1, but Lisa's combining it. We're reducing number of units, basically. You're losing a whole floor, so. But anyway, it just makes that cityscape a little bit lower. But to say that perspective is the play on here, and I don't think what we're reading in an elevation format is what you're really going to see. And so to me, the trade-off here has been handsomely done. So I have to tell myself, would I support 30 inches more? Probably. It looks really elegant, and I think it's a matter of trying to decipher perspective on this, but still maybe accommodating something because it is such a massive contributor to this site. I probably would support it. Sheet A 1.1. In the big scheme of things. Because I think you've addressed a really handsome approach to dealing with that mass of the biggest building and the way it sits on the site and how it feels on the site if you were to walk up and down that sidewalk. And I've done it. And I've looked at Jameson Station, and this is going to feel so much different than Jameson Station, so much more inviting, the little green spaces, the courtyards, the in and outs. It's just the perspective, what we don't get to see. And while this is an excellent little drawing here, it is kind of farther away, but again, we don't really look at it like this. I think when you're in it, it's going to look really quite handsome. So A 1.1 for me.
When I started into this project, before we had our first gathering, and I looked at some of this and I said, wow, this can't be happening. But then with 275 units, but then it got into it, and I think my friend Mr. Laster made the statement that kind of the light bulb went off in my head. We have this massive growth upon us. And where are all these people going to live if they're down in this core that we call our, quote, gateway or historic district? And so I began to look at that a lot closer and understand more about what is being done here. And I think, so I'm coming along. And I think what you have shown here, and I go back to what, you're right to a degree, this is a great perspective on what one would see. It's not the actual thing, but it's a great perspective. And it's 338 feet from that main intersection of Franklin Road to Liberty Pike till we hit the townhomes. That's a pretty good distance. This project, along with the factory, truly, they're both unique situations, and we're dealing with unique situations. And so I'm trying to do some rationale with all of that. I think what you've done with 811 is perfect. I think the transition from the historic home to the townhomes to the west building, it just goes up. And I think that makes perfect sense. And I think yes, we've got a lot of pieces from a lot of different angles with Bowman, the Planning Commission, and Envision Franklin. All of that's got to come together. But I think we're on track here. And I like what you're doing. I appreciate the models. I appreciate all the thought that's gone into it. And I think we're on to something. So my mind is completely changed from what I thought it was, which is not unusual for me, making snap judgments before I really see the detail. But I think we've got something here to really work with, and I appreciate what you've gone through thus far. And I am A11 though is my vote.
Can I say something?
Absolutely.
Gary gave us a document recently that came out of Envision Franklin, where Envision Franklin Envision Franklin is an amazing document. It came out of a study that the committee did, is it called the committee, that kind of looked at where is there in the downtown Franklin core that is suitable for development. And it puts all the land through all these tests. Is it in a flood zone? Does it have sewage? Does it have water? Does it have access? Is there anything else around it? Is there a building on the site that makes it historical that you're gonna have to tear down all this stuff? And it rates the property, you guys know this, to what is developable, to developable. Is that the
Correct.
right word?
Suitability
Suitable.
analysis.
It calls this property very suitable for development. So this property will be developed because Franklin wants, you guys are calling for this to be a place that has development on it. And I think there are only 7 sites, correct, Amanda? Is that right?
I think Kelly can answer that.
Are there 7 Kelly, that are in the downtown, walkable to downtown?
Are you talking about the established area infill locations? Is
I
that
think-
what you're talking about? There are a few different maps. So there's a suitability analysis
Suitability
that speaks to how suitable land is to accommodate development, whether infrastructure is in place or very nearby, whether it's encumbered by floodplain or hillsides and hilltops. So there's that aspect of Envision Franklin. I will take this moment to also bring up the established and transitional area map, which is in Envision Franklin as well, and it looks at potential infill area opportunities, looking at whether or not an area is established or transitional, meaning does the area maintain its current character or is it expected to have that building form really change? And this site, I was just looking at that, this site is an established area infill opportunity. So it's calling for some infill, but also making sure that it meets the established character of the area. And then, if I could ask a question, the zoning is part of that, is that correct? In other words, the zoning and Envision Franklin, they have to correlate, is that correct? Or the intention was?
They should ultimately. So sometimes Envision Franklin calls out the future land use and building form of an area, but the zoning is something else. So when that's the case, the applicant typically brings forward a rezoning to better align with Envision Franklin, usually through a development plan process that goes to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen because they like to review developments such as this one.
Mm-hmm. And presently it's zoned?
I believe it's R4.
It's R4.
Yes.
Which is?
R4 is a context-based residential zoning district that looks to the areas around it to identify what height should be, what setback should be, et cetera.
What about density?
R4 addresses density more in terms of lot size and compatible lot widths and lot sizes for that area. It's a single-family residential zoning district. Envision Franklin supports multifamily residential, townhouses, duplexes, and single-family in this multifamily design concept that's in Envision Franklin.
Is there any green space requirement for this type of development?
There is in the zoning district, and of course, open space is heavily encouraged in Envision Franklin. There are requirements in the zoning ordinance that requires certain minimum amounts of open space and active gathering spaces for the residents who would live there.
And does this plan meet that?
We exceed.
Yeah.
Exceed it?
We would-
Highly
The minimum is
exceed.
5% open space.
Huh.
The
I
minimum
know.
would be 5%.
We have an
informal.
extraordinarily low open space requirement for apartments, extraordinarily low.
Yeah.
I think when we went to Serenbe,
Right.
it was like 40%,
Yes.
and we're 5.
Yeah.
But you all are actually going to be,
I think we're near 40.
Yeah, we would exceed the minimum by far
Okay,
in space.
okay.
And
Because parking's
Underground is
underground.
part, yeah, as Amanda said, structured parking underground affords us the opportunity to much more amenitize the project.
And Mary, I'm so sorry that I love this commission because I've lived in a historic home for 30 years and protected a home. And protecting Franklin is very near and dear to all of us on this team. Yes. Especially you. I mean, you've protected some beautiful old historic cities. And so when you say this is big, it is. And the thing is, something is going to be done with this land, and that's weighty. That's
Yes,
weighty for us, you know,
Absolutely.
as a team.
I agree. Something's going to be done with this land. I don't question that at all. I just kind of like, is the city looking at the traffic? Those are the questions that we don't have control over. But as someone who's worked on the fabric of Franklin for a long time, I hope somewhere all of this comes together because, as I say, yes, something will happen here. 200 and what is it?
75.
75 units is profound.
So Mary, you bring up some great points. The way that our review process is set up is that we have the Historic Zoning Commission provide a preliminary recommendation to our Planning Commission and Board of Mayor and Aldermen on certain elements that are entitled during the development plan process that intersect with our design guidelines. That would be your height, massing, scale, setbacks. The Planning Commission will take that information into account as it looks at things that the zoning ordinance and the land use plan consider, like traffic and street widths and parking, circulation, things like that.
And I have
that
friends
was for the BOMA.
Yeah, I have friends that live on Daniels, my children's friends, and they're having their houses torn down or elevated. So I hope we'll be looking at how the water and everything works through there.
Absolutely.
I'm glad you said that because that was one thing I forgot to mention. I did last time, that I was concerned about the impact on those folks on Daniels Drive. On Old Liberty Pike. And that's still there. So you've mentioned somewhere in what I've seen, or like Gary did in his letter, that you'd talk to the various residents. I don't know if those people behind there have been talked to or not, but that's a sensitive, we need to be sensitive to those folks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think one of the things that the Middle Eight will help is there is a sewage issue down there and a piping issue that we're going to have to fix. They do have a flooding issue down there.
They do.
We won't be able to fix that, but we will fix some of the pipes and the infrastructure that they're currently. I know they're very concerned right now with the fact that people are parking on their street. A real effect of the events that happen in downtown Franklin, like
That's all over
Dickens.
down Franklin.
Yeah, it's all
When
of
all
us.
the events take
Everybody
place.
loves. It's not our fault. Everybody loves
Right.
Franklin. They're coming here.
Well, the plan's beautiful. Is the plan overwhelming? That's my question for where we are as a city. That
If it makes you feel any better, we've had meetings with staff, engineering staff and all, and terrific staff. They will ensure, and we are, by ordinance, obligated to provide the latest stormwater management controls. Right now, this 7.5 acres, it all runs off. And you know what? It slopes downhill. Now, if you get rain like there was rain in California recently, those homes are going to be inundated. No matter how many trees you have there. So that will no longer be the case when we put this development in. We're obligated to retain and control the water on our site. So just as we put these modern day improvements in place, it will lead to an improved situation for our neighbors to the south.
Okay.
I just have
Please.
one final comment. I'm not sure if a site visit was ever suggested, but we've been in this situation before. And a site visit has always been a great source of information when we're talking about height, mass, scale. And I know that this property is very wooded and it would be tricky to arrange that, but the applicants that have had similar proposals, they will put flags up indicating an example of a height, and perhaps that would be helpful.
I think the only question to that is timing of that. I think you're right. That will be helpful, but would it be now, or would it go through another step or two with other departments before we get to the site visit stage?
So the applicant actually did ask staff about a site visit, and it is typically the DRC that makes the request for the site visits. And so I think the next question they were about to ask you was whether or not you wanted a site
If it was
visit.
warranted or not, something you wish
So
to
if
consider.
it's something that the DRC would like to schedule, that's something we can schedule as soon as the week of January 30th. So not next week, because I can't meet public notice requirements for that, but the following week and on, I can certainly look at schedules and talk to each of you and see what would work.
And I think that what would really help at that would be where which you all have done before, you've done it before, Gary, is putting up something that shows how high things are going to be, to give a sense of it.
So on site visits like this, and I know Gary's
Like
worked through that with
balloons.
other projects, but having something like a balloon that shows how tall the extent of the buildings would be, marking off the ground so that you have a sense of the setback in the building footprint. Is that what I'm, is there
That's
anything
fine.
else
Is
you
that
need?
appropriate now, or does it need to wait a bit?
That is up to you all. So
I
the,
think it needs to be done now to not slow them down, because they're asking for a recommendation from us.
So I will say this, the applicant does intend to ask for a preliminary development plan recommendation from the Historic Zoning Commission at its February meeting. If you don't feel that you have enough information, it would be better to have that site visit before that. But they would need to submit their materials by the end of next week in order to meet the application deadline. I just cannot accommodate one until the following week.
And that works, right, Amanda? Because we can submit and then do the site visit?
As long as your materials don't change. If you would need to change your materials based on the site visit comments, then it would be recommended that you pull your application and wait another cycle. So it may be best for the applicant to consider waiting another cycle before submitting a preliminary recommendation, but that's not something I can require. I just think that might be better for you as far as making sure that the input from the site visit is accommodated in your application set.
And it may be very helpful as part of this. It's a little bit of difference from the other projects that have come forward with site visits to really show those floor lines too, especially the top of the new first story and each story going up to the top of the building itself, to give them an idea of how that relates to the surrounding buildings.
Yeah, just speaking to that is sometimes difficult to do. It's we've used balloons before, the wind, the trees, it's just
The
so
wind will
hard.
blow 'em.
It's just, I'm not sure if there's a valuable way to do
They've
that.
done, the best I've ever seen is where they did it PVC pipe
Yeah.
rather than a balloon.
Gary did that.
Because,
You did
yeah, we went over on the one on
Creekside,
Creekside,
yeah.
and the wind was
Yeah,
blowing the
it's hard.
balloon. But I'm thinking of ones we've done with PVC, and it seemed to work. Now, that high up in the air, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's
Kathy,
just,
you've seen
just to put it in the ground and,
You went on your own site visit, it sounds like.
Yeah, what I guided everything off of was Jameson Station.
yeah.
And, had I gotten on the roof there, and then I could have staked up how much
Yes,
taller were we
that'd
gonna be. I thought about asking somebody about that, but, and then too, if I got up on the roof there, I could see the perspective of it that
would
way.
be
I mean, we're talking 30 inches.
Yeah.
I mean, what's 30 inches? That's lower than a kitchen counter height.
Yeah.
So, but I looked at it from a relationship to Jameson
That's
Station.
the best marking
And
point
that's
you have in the
that's
site.
the
It's-
highest building is on the corner of
Makes sense.
that, and that corner point, and all the other elements of how you've designed this building with turning it and stepping it back have enhanced just less pressure on the height, in my opinion. And certainly with the new way of doing it on A1, the 3+1 looks really good too. But relationship to Jameson, I think, is how we could determine height. And like Kelly was talking about, we could see where 22 feet is. I don't know.
So we could certainly accommodate a site visit if that's requested, but I think it'd be fair to evaluate whether or not that's something that would actually help you understand the concerns that you still have any differently, just to be mindful of the applicant's time and your own. And if you do feel like it'll help, like we could let the applicant know now what those things are that you want to see.
One thing I thought that would help me is to realize the size. I'm not as concerned about the height. I'll just say that I'm very concerned about the open space. I think it's too low in Franklin, and that's what I think.
So providing a building footprint.
Could you provide this over the Harpeth project? Because I think it would let us know and it would help me better understand the massing that we're talking about.
I mean, we can speak to that right now, Mary.
Oh, you can? Good.
We've done that for ourselves,
Yeah.
actually, just to understand, because the parking garage situation changes things. And so Harpeth sits on 3.75 acres plus or minus, and we're on 7. So building-wise, we have a similar amount of building area. Our buildings are just pulled apart, and what allows us to do that is putting the parking underneath.
Right. So they're about the size of the Harpeth.
We're on.
But
quite-
if you split Harpeth in half, is that what you're saying?
No,
This
No.
is twice the size of the Harpeth.
Twice the
So it's a
size.
similar amount of building area.
Twice the what?
It's twice the amount of land.
Land and twice the size.
No.
No, I thought that's what you said.
So similar size on twice the land area.
Got it.
Spread apart.
Which affords us more open space than
Correct.
Harpeth.
Got it.
So Harpeth is built all the way to the street because their parking is, Harpeth is built to the street because their parking is on the interior. But They
Right.
did a beautiful job. I think Harpeth should be, and you guys should be applauded. Harpeth is, I think, personally, as a person who's lived here, Harpeth has made that area, remember what it was?
Yes.
Oh, yes, we're with you.
No question.
Yeah.
No, and what they went through, we've talked to them, and they're, we're just like, thank you. You have helped Franklin. When we drive in, I am proud of this corner. It is
They
beautiful.
went through, I've forgotten how many, but it was.
44, they told
44
us.
public
Yes.
meetings, yes.
I counted them for them.
Yes.
44.
And they were great. You can move here.
Mary.
We can do that exhibit, though, the overlay, and it'll show you what we've seen.
That would be great if you all could overlay the Harpeth on this project, because I think I'm very visual, but this is a lot to try to envision.
Absolutely.
I think Kathy, though, said it accurately. This is a heavily wooded site. You can barely make it through there.
Oh, no, I'm not
Even a
asking to,
superbly conditioned natural athlete.
I'm not
has a
asking-
hard time walking through.
what I do,
I'm
I agree. I think what Kathy said, I think if we did a site visit, that to be able to be permitted to go to the top,
Right.
get up on Jameson on something to look out is going to be
But we could walk
more
from
helpful.
Jameson, we could walk along, we could walk along Liberty Pike, and there's sufficient lawn area there where we could even put a couple of paint marks and show you where the edges of the building are. But Jameson Station, you've got a full-scale model
Yeah.
of what the height's gonna be.
Right.
We're gonna be 30 inches
yeah,
taller than that.
right.
Right across the street. So.
And how much longer than that?
Well, we could take, maybe we take a can of paint and just paint the corners on the.
We've done that before.
grass
We staked it.
and-
Yeah, that would be helpful.
But then we go back, the building
Right.
that's tilted, and we go back.
Right.
We don't want to be chasing it into the woods, or we'll be making too much of a.
Yeah, it's just on the
really-
frontage,
really
the,
hard.
the sidewalk and the frontage, we can stake the corners and you kind of see the, where it sits on the site. And then, like you said, the relationship from standing on Jameson would be helpful.
All right, so,
Yeah, no, okay.
One more quickie. See this angle?
Yeah.
Flip it. Take us from Jameson Station the other way. And I think you're gonna really get the perspective of how this all sits on the site and how it's not gonna be such a monster. It makes sense that the stepping down. Remember, you got 338 feet coming from that front corridor off of Franklin Road. So we have a nice widening funnel effect of green space.
Any of my comments do not have to do with the height. I just want to say that.
Anyway, if we had a drawing for that, maybe that little perspective would give us both angles.
all right, so do we need a site? I don't need a site visit. Brian, do you need a site visit?
I don't need a site visit. I understand if people want.
Susan, you want a site visit?
I don't think so.
I'm okay with that.
Well, you can go.
I wouldn't mind the buildings being marked, but.
Well, the applicant can mark the
this is
building,
can
and
mark
I
it and
can
we can
let
see it
you
on our
know
own.
when
You can go out
This is
there anytime.
requiring,
Yeah,
am I
that's the
correct?
answer.
This is requiring rezoning.
We've done that. We have done that before.
This is requiring a rezoning.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. We go
Yes,
through a plan
and
development.
when we're doing a rezoning, I do not believe that this amount of open space in this particular part of town reflects anything of the character of anywhere in the area. So that's where I am.
And so the reason I'm saying I don't need a site plan, it's not because I've made up my opinion against it. That is not it at all. The reason I need a site plan is because.
Site visit.
A site
Site
visit,
visit.
a site visit, sorry about that.
We got it.
Is, you know, when you're on the commission and our purview are the historic guidelines. And so, you know, if this is being proposed on Second Avenue or on Fifth Avenue, I mean, I'd know exactly. I mean, I'd say no. And, you know, when we protect view sheds that are historic, like Creekside, and then we come to places like this, which isn't even an historic road, because that part of Franklin Pike was put in, I don't know, was when the factory.
We were living there.
So, I mean, that's not even an historic
Road.
road at that
Liberty,
point.
yeah.
You've got 300 and some odd feet from Franklin Road. I mean, you've got that gradual, so when I look at that and I think, well, you know, where is a place you could do something like this on the periphery of the core of Franklin? Because that's where we are.
Yes.
I think this site is a great candidate for it. So, you know, I do weigh the height, you know, think about the height, but that's not something I'm going to let, you know, determine the vote. But that, yeah, if we were going to do it on any site, I think this would be the place to do something like this across from the factory. I look forward to seeing what happens to that district.
Yeah.
But I know we're going to probably have to vote on this to the planning commission before that. So
Yeah.
those are just my parting comments.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, is there anything else? Okay.
I was getting
Thank you all.
all ready for a site visit. So is that no site visit?
It sounds like a no. I would recommend.
See,
Yes, that could be part of their application.
yeah.
Put that down there.
Thank you.
All right, I think we're adjourned.